at 7 o'clock, I want to open the meeting.
Oh, very smart.
We have a couple of bills. I have a payment to Bill Scanlon for $2,400 for the for the time period September 24th, 2018 to October 5th, 2018. And I have payroll for Jane for the period for the payroll week ending 10/19/2018 in the amount of $982.30. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You just want to go right into if you're here for the McCory Plumbing, you can please sign the sign-in sheet. In accordance with section 200-7.1 and 200-7.2 of the Charlton zoning bylaw, the Charlton Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, October 17th, 2018 at 7 p.m. in the Senior Center in the George C. McKinstry Building, 37 Main Street, Charlton, Mass. On the application of Ken Pecor, am I saying that right? Pecor. KMN Properties, LLC, 250 Stafford Street, Charlton, Mass. For site plan approval to construct a 6,000 square foot building with associated parking and utilities for a plumbing and heating business. The property is located on Worcester Road, Charlton, Mass., adjacent to the Barkwood Inn. The property is listed as Assessors Map 38, Block C, Lot 4, contains approximately 3.44 acres and is zoned community business. Copies of the site plan application are available for inspection at the planning board's office and the town clerk's office during regular business hours. Any person interested or wishing to be heard should appear at the time and place designated.
Good evening, Frank Carey with Urban Engineering, representing the project. So thank you for the introduction. As you mentioned, the project is located to the south of Route 20 on the eastern portion of town, next to the Oxford town line, adjacent to the Barkwood Inn. Just going to run through the existing conditions quick, run through the proposed project, and then open it up to questions. The existing site's been partially cleared. I don't know what the intentions were for the previous development, but they put a septic system in, and there's a well already installed. Site's partially cleared. There are resource areas on the site, several actually. There's bordering vegetated wetland, riverfront associated with the Little River, 200 foot riverfront area. Horizontal lines, it's in natural heritage area as well, and I believe there's flood zone associated with the river. So we have several different resource areas. We're meeting with the Conservation Commission. As far as access, existing access on Route 20, it's a state road. There is an existing curb cut that's shared with Barkwood Inn. And basically the front is just gravelled as they were, kind of roughing the site out and preparing for the development. So what we're proposing is a 6,000 square foot building. It's for heating and plumbing, and so the building's set up to have overhead doors, 3 overhead doors for box trucks loading, unloading, as well as parking spaces for staff. We are proposing a stormwater basin in the back and fencing the back portion for security reasons, because pumping equipment can be expensive and trucks and whatnot, so the back half will be fenced off. We are providing a secondary access off of Route 20. We've submitted plans to Mass DOT for their review and comment. We haven't heard back yet as far as I know. We've also gotten comments back from Graves Engineering, Mike Ingray, who can represent his comments himself later on. And so we do have some things that we need to address regarding Mike's comments. I don't feel that they're all that onerous or any deal breakers in here, but there are some things to address, such as adding a secondary accessible space, and there's a whole list of others that Mike can go through. But generally, we expect people to come in, park, work, leave, We are providing landscaping consistent with the bylaws, and erosion controls along the perimeter, the grading and drainage, so you can see the basin with forebay. The idea is to collect the stormwater, treat it, outlet it, as well as collecting some of the stormwater out front, because we don't want it draining down to Route 20. So we did some area drains out front to collect any runoff between the building and Route 20, bring that all around back as well, because Mass DOT doesn't like stormwater coming out onto their roads. So this is our sedimentation erosion control plan. So tracking pads at the site entrances to keep materials from tracking onto Route 20. Silt fence and hay bales along the perimeter. And these are the main controls. The basin will serve as a temporary basin until it's turned into a permanent basin. And the Mass DOT plan, which basically just has the layout to actually get the new curb cut installed. And the rest are details which I won't bore you too much with. That's the general plan. 6,000 square foot building with associated parking for commercial use. Any questions?
Thank you. Do we have questions on the board, or do we want to have Mike go over his comments first?
Yeah, I'll have Mike go over comments first.
Okay. So we conducted a review and issued a letter dated October 1st that had 23 comments. The majority of those are very minor, in my opinion, can be addressed pretty easily. We can talk about it if you wish, but I thought I'd just point out a couple of them. Talked about, Mr. Vicario talked about the handicap parking that should be added. There's also a row of parking in the back that the width of the parking spaces aren't compliant. They're 8.5 feet versus 9 feet wide, so that needs to be adjusted. And I think the biggest comment for me on this is the proposed second curb cut on the right-hand side of the site. With any project on Route 20, I always have a comment about this. If DOT comes back with a comment, for example, if they don't wish to see that second curb cut and utilize the existing, then they would have to, if this was already issued a decision on it, they'd have to come back for a revision, in particular on this plan, because if you have parking for customers, that would, you have to go through a gated area to get to, so that it might require some different kind of a layout. So I just point that out, if DOT does say no to that second curb cut, they would have to come back before this board. Again, if there's any, on the stormwater, we are doing test bits tomorrow, witnessing test bits that the applicant's conducting, so that'll address that comment. And if there's anything else in particular the board wishes to review, I can go over that in more detail. Otherwise, that's the major points.
Mike, does the road division go all the way across that lot?
Yeah, so,
So,
you know, the recent work on Route 20 made it a divided road there. And it's not shown on the plan, but I think the Jersey barriers that separate the two sides end right about where that proposed second curb cut is. So they're showing that as a, a right exit only lane, sign that way. I had a comment that the existing curb cut isn't so signed, but obviously it has to be right only as well, so perhaps another sign will be added there to make that clear.
Would you care to comment on that? Is it necessary that you have that second curb cut, or could you live with just a common curb cut with the buffer?
I think you could live with just one. I think they'd like to have the two, to have the option. So,
is there any particular reason why? Is there an advantage to that second curb cut?
well, if they could just create or reduce the conflict with Parkwood coming in and out. So if they could come in and out on that side, and the Parkwood would use that side, then it would just avoid any conflicts between the two. I think we could do it without it, but that's would be the main reason. So they would primarily be using the right-hand side when they enter, and Parkwood would be using it. So I think that's the primary reason. And if DOT comes back and has issues with it, then you need to revise accordingly.
Just correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, too. I think there's an existing septic system that they propose to retain.
Yes.
So I think that kind of dictates where the building wants to be. I think if that septic system were not there, that building would probably be more to the right on the site. So that may have, maybe a factor in why the building is where it is and that second curb cut is proposed.
Who mainly, the business, is it pretty much employees are coming in and out? And
Yes, that's my
there's not
understanding.
It's not
Not like
retail?
yeah, it's not like a retail shop, no, it's more, again, storage of equipment, office space and stuff like that, to load up, go out to the site, you know.
Do you know how many employees they have?
Parking. Actually, no, we didn't list it on the parking compliance, because we did parking based on square footage. We just did one space per 250 square feet, and so we required 24, we have 27. So we just kind of put as much as we could that was reasonable for the site, so we should be able to accommodate a fair amount of employees.
Is the existing curb cut on this site or on the Berkwood property?
It's on both.
So the lot line splits the,
Yeah, it actually,
so is there an agreement between?
yeah, I
the
believe
parties?
there's access easements.
Oh, it's okay.
So yeah, so it actually enters on our property and then immediately turns onto the Markwood property. So the curb, yeah, it extends over just a hair of the curb, so it's not all the way. And water supply would be from an existing well that's back in this corner, and so we're gonna, the well was put in a while back when they put the septic in, so we're just gonna reuse that existing well. The building's small enough, it doesn't need to be sprayed over.
Frank, this is a very environmentally constrained site. As you
Yes.
mentioned, you've got wetlands,
Yes,
floodplain,
yes,
riverfront,
Yes.
and endangered species habitat.
yes.
So how likely is it that you think you can get this project approved as designed, or do you think there might be
Well, I think it's-
conditions either from the Conservation Commission or from the Endangered Species Program
That's
that
the
would
one I'm
alter
concerned
that
about.
site
The
plan?
Conservation Commission, I think we're in the 200-foot riverfront area, I don't think we're really doing anything in the 100-foot riverfront area. It's an already cleared site, so most of our work is buffer zone work. The wetland impacts that we have, it's a temporary impact for the water line, but we're not, otherwise not affecting any of the wetland resource areas. And the natural heritage will be the big one. If there is habitat, I mean, again, it's a cleared field right now, so hopefully there isn't good breeding habitat for whatever critters out there, but if it is, then that could be a major impediment to the project. We're scheduled to go with Conservation Commission in about 10 minutes, so we'll get their feedback tonight as well. And, you know, I was gonna ask for continuance tonight, just so we can integrate all of Mike's comments, as well as doing the soil testing tomorrow. Any results from that, we could integrate, and that way we have, you know, a plan that addresses planning board comments as well as conservation comments, and hopefully we hear back from Natural Heritage prior to the next meeting, that if they, you know, have a no-take letter or whatever their letter is, we can address that as well. So that would be the goal.
One other thing, Mass DOT has done a preliminary environmental impact report for its Route 20 project.
Okay.
And they're showing a wet basin on that property.
Okay.
So when you contact DOT about the curb cut, you should ask them if they intend to actually put that basin where they're showing it, or whether they have an alternate location. If it's on that site, then obviously they have to be in agreement with
Yeah, and
the owner.
if they plan to do a taking of where the building is, we're basically dead in the water there as well. So if they are coming in and putting the basin right where that building is, well, please approve it, so that way you can get compensated for a buildable lot with an approved building on it, because it's a lot more valuable if they do a taking in that regard.
We have that document upstairs in the office.
Okay, yeah, no, I wasn't aware of that, so that would be definitely something worth keeping an eye on, because that could, yeah, greatly affect the project.
Right. When do you expect to get comments back from Natural Heritage Program?
We sent it almost a month ago now, so I would hope soon. You know, typically they review things within 60 days, so we're halfway there now. So.
Could you forward that
Yeah.
review letter to the board?
Do we want to open this up to the public? Do you guys have any comments or anything first? Questions?
I don't.
Do we have any comments, questions from?
Sure. I had one question. Is there, I can't see the plans very good from here. The only thing that concerns me is that second curb cut and access and egress. Is there something in that driveway plan that forces traffic to only go right. I see it as a, if it is beyond the barrier, it's gonna be an entrance for Barkwood, for people coming westbound.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, so on the new entrance, we're proposing that it's right turn only. So we did have signage for right turn only on the new entrance. The current entrance isn't signed
Sure.
at this point.
Yep.
So this one, we definitely say right turn only.
That was a comment that you will,
Yep.
that will be addressed.
Yeah, okay,
Yep.
okay, because there's a lot of traffic
Yeah,
that
no,
I
I
see
think-
stop at that border and make that turn into Barkwood anyways.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, you can put signs, whether people follow them or not is, up to them and up to law enforcement to enforce the regulations.
Another question?
So, we have, when we want to, we have to continue this. So what are we thinking?
Do you have a thought of, we'd be ready by?
Yeah, I think addressing Mike's comments, we could have ready in the 2 weeks. I mean, like I said, we'll do the soil test tomorrow, and from that, we can basically address most of Mike's comments.
Wouldn't we want the state comments though as well?
We would, and I just don't know when we're gonna get them. So I don't wanna drag it out too long. I'd like to request the 2-week continuance or to the next meeting. And then if we feel that that's a critical point that needs to be addressed prior to closing, if we don't have that information, I would just request a continuance at that time, but I'd like the placeholder if we could. We are able to get some feedback on that.
The next meeting is November 7th, I think, right?
Yes.
That's 3 weeks.
We have to be really careful about what we're scheduling. We have a very big hearing,
Right.
and with tight time constraints. The board needs to, well, let's
Well, if
discuss.
if you schedule this early, I don't think there's a lot of outstanding issues or discussion that's gonna happen on ours. So if we're early, we're in, we're out, and we're
We
not
need
holding up
to
schedule.
figure out how we want to fit. We have to have the biggest project Charlton has ever, or will ever have, probably, by December 3rd.
Fourth.
And so, we need to be very careful about what we schedule. And we can only go so late, and we
Right.
can add meetings, but we have to be, we have to take care of us a little bit too. So before we reschedule this, do we wanna, I feel bad when we push things so far out, but we have priorities and we have to kinda, deal with them. So do we have a feel if that's what we're going to do? Do we wanna push this out till after VGG due date? Or do we wanna try to squeeze this in?
No, I think we try and squeeze it in.
Yeah,
Only
No,
because
we-
of
I
the,
think we can,
yeah.
this won't take a lot of time.
And I wouldn't put
Maybe
it after
10.
VGG though.
Then put it
Right,
early in the
put it
meeting.
early in the
and-
meeting and-
Yeah,
Right.
just like it is.
Take care of
Okay.
any issues, get them in and out,
Yeah.
and schedule the next one if we need it.
All right, so we'll do we have a motion to continue the public hearing to November 7th at 7 PM?
Make a motion to approve it to, the public hearing to November 7th at 7 o'clock.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you.
The 7:15 will continue the public hearing for Valley Green Grove. So, just to kind of keep things moving along, tonight we're looking at engineering, we're looking at the, our engineers' review of the plans, stormwater management, that kind of stuff. So, please just limit questions, comments to that area, because we have a lot to go through, and we'll have, strict guidelines on the discussion areas, and at the very end, we'll kind of mesh everything and open and talk about anything that's left at the very end, but let's try to keep this on track. And all emotions, please, just if you have a question, we'll answer the question. Thank you. So do we, we just want to go through the site?
I think Mike was gonna discuss that some of
Okay, thank you. So we reviewed the first set of plans that was submitted and supporting documents and issued a letter dated September 24th, in which we had 49 comments. A good portion of these are minor notation, clarification issues, some stormwater revisions. Like the last hearing, I'll just touch on a few important ones, I think, but of course we can go back and discuss any other comments if the board wishes. Following that, the board would look to comment number 7 in my letter. Excuse me. That's regarding a question I had on the clarification of the parking requirements for this project and what use category that would fall under the bylaw. And typically that clarification could come from the zoning enforcement officer, so I was asking for that more than anything else to see if what they're proposing is adequate. And it's based right now, I believe, on the equivalent of the transportation industrial utility use, so 1 space per 500 square feet, more or less. They are proposing about 263 parking spaces. And they stated they have a work shift that'll have 150 employees. So by that math, it seems that there's adequate parking for what they're proposing at this time, but I want to make sure it's what's required by the bylaw is correct. So would appreciate clarification from the zoning enforcement officer on what bylaw requirement applies. So that's number 7. Number 17, with regard to fire department access around the building, I requested that they provide some backup, whether it's a vehicle turning or swept path analysis to demonstrate that the road around the building that they're proposing is accessible by the fire department's equipment. I'm sure the fire department will look for the same. Perhaps it's already been submitted. I didn't see it as part of the submittal that we received. And just on the layout, it appears that maybe they have already checked that, but again, asking for the backup for review. That's number 17. Number 18, with regard to landscaping, they do appear to be providing the required number of trees for parking spaces and a caliber required tree. I would refer to the board on locations of where that's proposed, so I'd ask that the board just take a look at the proposed landscaping and see if they concur with the locations that plantings are proposed. So that's 18. Number 22 is kind of a point I just wanted the board to note, because it isn't evident when you're looking at the site plans, that as part of the project they're proposing a cogeneration facility, which includes a 35-foot tall cooling tower that is somewhat higher than the building, which I believe is around 21.5 feet. So that becomes sort of the dominant feature on the site, especially considering its location at the top of the driveway. I haven't seen any renderings yet of the site, so not sure exactly what that will look like. I'm just pointing out that to the board that is the proposal, and that tower is higher than the proposed building. So that's comment number 22. Comment 23 is regarding light pollution and the grow lights, which are proposed to be used at night. In the narrative, they indicated they're going to be using or employing blackout curtains on the greenhouses to eliminate excessive light pollution. I asked for more information on that, how that works, how effective they are controlling the spillage of light outside the greenhouses, and how they're deployed at the proper time each night, whether that's an automatic system or requires a person to do that. So I'm asking just some more backup on that. Moving to stormwater comments in number 27. I asked for a portion of the stormwater analysis to look at it at a smaller scale, and this board will recall for some of the solar projects that have been reviewed recently, located on hilltops with abutting residential properties downgrade to look at, almost look at each individual property individually and how they're affected by the stormwater from the project. The way they've done it at present is looking at over a larger scale area, looking at one side of the project, if you will, downgrading and analyzing that. And while that may prove to be a decrease, if you were to look at individual properties, they may experience an increase individually. So I asked them to look at on a smaller scale basis on some of the downgrading properties. And I guess the only one I'd probably bring up at this point is number 40, which is again a stormwater related question, and that refers to the proposed subsurface infiltration systems that are proposed around the building. At present, I don't feel they've demonstrated they have the required 2 foot of vertical separation between the bottom of these systems and the estimated seasonal high groundwater table. So I think it may require some additional test pits to be done in those areas to prove that out. And again, there are more comments, but we can certainly discuss any of those if the board wishes, or go back into the comments that I did discuss.
So are the new plans, do they take into effect the comments that the ones, the set we just? Is it?
Yeah, should I do an introduction real quick, just for
Sure.
the record? We kind of jumped right in. Mike Novak from Meridian Associates, civil engineer on the project. Dan Larry with me as well, the applicant's project manager. Katie Goldstein, staff engineer with Meridian Associates as well, and Attorney Michael Rosen, the attorney for the project. There we go. So to answer your question, I think was, have we applied, do those plans reflect these comments? Yes, they do. The response letter, which gives individual responses to all of Ms. Andre's comments, should be reflected on the plan set as well. Unfortunately, we're not diligent enough to point to each sheet as to where exactly the comments were, but they are addressed. And if you want me to quickly touch on some of the highlight ones I circled as he went through.
That would be perfect.
You want to do that now? Okay. There's a couple that
Is
I'll.
that okay? Is that okay?
Yeah, is that, I'll keep it brief, because Mike hasn't had a chance to see any of this, so I'm not looking for him to agree or disagree. I'll just give you the quick kind of understanding of how we replied. There's a couple that apply to me, there's a couple that Dan will take. And if I miss any, if you could just let me know if I skipped one. I think I got them all. I'm gonna skip to the ones that are for me first, and then I'll hand it to Dan. I think the first one that I can touch on quickly is number 17, which is the 20-foot wide access. We have, long story short, took us a little while to get the template, we got it today. So now that I have everything for the truck, the biggest truck that they said, I think it's Tower 1, we've got everything, we'll build the model. In the next submittal, you'll see that. So the comment that's actually in there is actually outdated as of today, so. So that one you will not see, but you will see at the next one. The 18, I think, is just, as Mike stated, we'll be looking to the board for input on the landscaping and anything that has to do with would-be additional requirements. Oops, sorry, pages are sticking together here. 27, again, this is big picture. I understand what Mike is looking for. We have taken another look at this and tightened it up. It'll be up to him on whether or not that's enough, but I think we have addressed that comment to the point where there's at least, we can start the dialogue on whether or not we're there. So, and my analysis at this point still reflects meeting or reducing at this point, so we haven't had to add any additional stormwater mitigation at this time so far. Yes. And then I think the last one was 40. Did I miss any that we talked about? There's a couple that will go to Dan, but additional soil testing? Yeah, that's fine. I think we can probably do that. We will do that. The question of when it makes sense to do it, I think Mike and I can figure out offline, and we can go from there. So I'm going to hand it over to Dan for a couple. We'll flip back to the other started. I think number 7 is the first one for him. The fire. I don't know.
Sure. Good evening again, Dan Leary. So with respect to number 7, I wouldn't speak for the building commissioner. We did have the discussion prior to the submittal of the first plan set, but I defer to the building commissioner to get back to the board on that. We do feel that the number 263 parking spaces is appropriate for this use. The next comment, number 22, is with respect to the cooling tower. So with the cooling tower, and there was some audience questions or public questions last time as well. We've submitted as part of our updated narrative some images of what the cooling tower would look like. So we've not actually rendered it to site, but we can and will do that. We've also been able to further engineer it by putting some of the cooling tower components subsurface. So we've been able to lower it to a 25-foot tower height. So if maybe the best way to describe what that would look like is at the very end of the narrative, we included some images in there. I'm not sure if you have that narrative in front of you.
Can you bring those down, that stuff like you need today?
Yep.
There was a weekend. Do you have it? I brought Yeah, right here.
Oh.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am, that's it.
Yep.
It's nearly the last page. So as you're looking at those, one also correction is that I think in our elevations, we had it's called an eave height. So the greenhouses are actually a sawtooth design. So the eave height's 21.5 feet, and the actual peak height is about just under 28 feet. So we tried to keep the cooling towers below that height as well.
So the towers are gonna be reduced to 25 feet now?
Yes, ma'am. And the narrative has that update in it.
We'll pass it down for you guys.
In the cooling towers in a future meeting, so when we talk about energy and those things, we have an energy engineer who's the expert, builds cooling towers in all sorts of environments, from rural to urban, who would really be the subject matter expert on what is a cooling tower and be able to answer those questions in the future.
We just have a copy of this?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, can we just wait until we'll open it up for it.
I just wanted to ask when you got the file.
We went just today.
And there's just one copy?
We'll post and share, we promise.
I'm just curious.
I'd like to see what that looks like from the front of all the residences. So, if you could do renditions of that in, I guess, in general, all the buildings.
Yes.
Standing, like, what all of the abutters are gonna see, if you could go down there, just so we can get a feeling of what they're gonna be looking at.
Yes, we can We can add that to the rendering the renderings that we have already presented. Yes, ma'am.
We've been making that a requirement for even all the solar, we just, from everybody's backyard, front yard, we make just to see what they're visually going to be looking at.
Yes, ma'am. The next question was with respect to lights. How does the dark curtain work? And we've included, and you may or may not have it, I think this one, we included electronic. We included a number of documents with today's submission that are electronic, cut sheets, product literature, things like that. This would be one of them. Basically, the way the dark curtain works is it's a complete blackout curtain. It's several layers of a material that blocks out, the manufacturer says 99.99% of the light. So we immediately look at that and say, okay, so that it's doing what it's supposed to do, because the plants, when it's dark, the plants need to be in the dark. They can't have even a small amount of light. So it's very important for our operation that the plants block, that these shade curtains, dark curtains block out the lights. And as far as the seams, so these curtains are actually drawn automatically. It's on a building control system. They're drawn sort of like by wire, by cables. They get drawn across the top of the canopy, and then they get retracted during daytime and when we want natural light to come in. The edges of these are actually sealed by rubber gasket to the metal infrastructure of the greenhouse. So there's not seams that are going to let light through. So I'm working on getting some more images of that to submit in addition to the manufacturer's product sheets. But hopefully you'll be able to have those questions answered. But we still say there will be no light pollution from the grow lights within the greenhouse.
Do you know now, if, would that be manually, automatic through computers, or?
It's a building automation system that happens at a certain time of day, and that's managed by technicians that make sure that it's happening exactly when it's supposed to. Because again, from our operational side, if it doesn't happen when it's supposed to, we have problems with the crops. And I believe that was addressing all the questions.
Is there additional questions on the board that we want to go through?
I have one. Have you guys made any more progress or effort for a curb cut off of 20?
Yeah, sure. We've continued to study that, because if it's an option, we would like to make it an option. That work is still ongoing. There's quite a bit of coordination before we necessarily would want to bring a proposal forward, but it's being studied very closely.
So nothing's been submitted?
Nothing's been
to
submitted.
the state?
That's something that we will address in detail when we do the traffic, which will be the next meeting, the next scheduled meeting with.
Okay.
And just because I know we're just being straightforward because we're of lack of time, I see us asking for a decommissioning bond, because we do for solar farms, and we honestly have nothing to compare it to, if that makes any sense. So if something big, the feds come down and say no more marijuana in Massachusetts, or you're not getting any more. And this gets all shut down. We don't, the town, I don't really want the town to be stuck with this big giant metal building. So if you could start the process of calculating what you feel a decommissioning bond, and then we'll have our engineer review that calculation. Standard procedures with all of our solar farms, especially all of our solar farms that are in close to homes. So again, we just don't want that to be a last minute condition and you say, oh, that's why I'm telling you ahead of time, so you can get that moving. Thank you. Do we have more questions right now, or do we want to open it up to the public?
Did we get additional cut sheets on the odor mitigation plans and everything? Was that submitted?
We've not submitted any additional cut sheets on those. on that.
But they are coming.
Yeah, there's an odor mitigation plan. So, well, so for the last submittal, for the first submittal, there's an odor mitigation plan that's got cut sheets for the different types of filters, the carbon filters, like polar the ionization. So that's in there in pretty good detail. Was there additional detail that you were looking for?
I haven't seen those yet, so I'm
Oh.
just curious if that was going to be part of the discussion.
Are they not posted? Did you?
I didn't read it in detail.
Okay.
Is there other factories, facilities out there that use the same system, or is this a completely engineered for this type of facility or this facility by itself? Is there something to compare this to? It's industry standard?
It's an industry standard, yes, sir, and it's considered a best practice, and it's an industry standard.
And we are currently searching, I've asked Bill to reach out and find an engineer that specializes in odor and mitigation. So that'll kind of be reviewed by someone who knows what they're really doing. We'll make sure that.
So the same individual that would be speaking about the energy, for example, in the cooling towers, also Vanderweil Engineers is also the mechanical engineer who is the engineer of record for the odor control systems. Who's not here tonight.
Yeah, and that's not, we're just to make sure that there's no surprises for us or you. We're trying to be up front. So again, so we're not at the last meeting in November saying we want all these things and it's just impossible. So if there's any other such things that we
Environmental
can.
impact plan? Do we have one? Has there been one submitted?
Yes, and so
Has it
I'm glad
been
you brought
reviewed?
that up. So the ESA phase one has been submitted. It's a pretty lengthy document. In fact, our engineer of record, our licensed site LSP, is Frank Lilly, who's sitting in the back, and he's actually here tonight to answer any questions that would relate to site environmental.
And we will have a specific meeting to look at, the environmental issues that would be toward our board. Obviously, you have the conservation upstate with Todd, but with us, we also are charged with the environmental impacts. And again, with that, we are currently looking for a land / environmental
Engineering firm?
lawyer specialist that understands that's happening. We're currently in.
Patsy, since we have Mr. Lilly here, would it be appropriate to ask him to summarize the findings of his soil investigations?
Do we wanna just?
If we have another meeting set up for that would be fine.
I just don't want to be here. We kind of set I mean, unless, I guess he's already paid to be here. And do we want to? What do you think?
Ma'am, Frank is actually not going to be available for about the next month or so. He can be by correspondence, but because of his travels on the anticipated meeting nights, we brought him tonight just in case there was any questions.
Do you want to come on up so we can you guys, so let's.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
And we'll open you up to us, and then we'll open you up to our audience, so you'll have,
Okay.
I think, answers. Can we have your name for the record?
It's Frank Lilly, it's Lilley, with Golder Associates, an environmental engineer, and I'm also a licensed site professional licensed by the Commonwealth. If anybody wants me to explain what that license is, I will, but if you know what it is.
I think it would be helpful if you did explain. if you
Oh,
don't
okay.
mind.
The Commonwealth licenses professionals to render opinions on cleanups of hazardous waste sites. And it's a privatized program, the first in its country. It was implemented in 1993. And so it's been described as you're being deputized to make opinions in place of the Commonwealth. This particular site is not under that program or the Massachusetts contingency plan. There's been nothing found that's reportable, but they've retained me, and because of my experience with different sites to deal with soil management and environmental issues. and I would just say environmental issues, non-wetlands issues, talking about, you know, the use of the site for pesticides, herbicides, and past uses and development. The Conservation Commission Environmental is a separate meeting with a separate group of professionals.
This is for environment. I have a, so I read that it doesn't require NEPA on the reports. Why doesn't it? It seems like a pretty huge project to not require a full NEPA review.
Maybe if I could just take that one, ma'am. So we are pursuing MEPA processes right now. We've had discussions with the MEPA officials, and we're working towards standard processes through MEPA right now.
I've actually not been retained to do the MEPA consulting. I know what it is. I'm not going to speak to it.
So right now, it's still up in, so there may very well need to be a NEPA review, and we'll go back and deal with that later. Is that what you're saying? So.
Yes, so we've retained another consultant who's a MEPA specialist, we're running through that process in parallel. There's a lot of processes that are happening in parallel. That's one of them. Yeah.
So environmental, what do you?
So tell us a little about the site and some of the challenges.
Well, we were retained to do due diligence on the property, and we did what's called a Phase 1 environmental site assessment. It's in accordance with an ASTM standard, which is very common for commercial properties. It's usually, it follows a national standard. It's required typically by banks. It's not mandatory. There's no government authority requiring it, but most clients that are doing large developments do it. In this case, they've retained us to do that. And so that involves looking at the past history of the use of the site, going back to greenfields. In this particular site, it was, we all know Mr. Benjamin's here, it was used as an apple orchard for agricultural crops. Pesticides, herbicides were used. And there was various above ground and underground storage tanks. We look at all those issues to try to determine if there's contamination or potential for contamination that our client should be aware of, or if he's developing the site, that they might run into and they need to manage it. Just because we find contamination or the presence of contamination doesn't mean it stops the project. It just means that we have to manage it, and you know, obviously we have to pay for the cleanup or negotiate with the seller. And so we went through that Phase 1 ESA process, and I believe you have a copy. As part of that, we recommended we do the Phase 2. And Phase 2 in our language is you're doing a limited subsurface investigation where you take soil samples, and we collected soil samples from what I call areas of the old operations, and we tried to target the areas that were the oldest parts of the orchard. And the reason we did that, and we collected soil samples for herbicides, pesticides, and the whole suite of compounds in the upper 2 feet, and that's usually where these compounds accumulate because of the spraying. We did that in the old orchard because going back through history, that's where likely types of herbicides and pesticides that were not approved by EPA were used historically years ago. The newer parts of the orchard and the current spraying, they conduct all in accordance with using EPA-approved standards. And our review of the operations indicated it was a very well-run operation. The pesticides, herbicides were managed very carefully, and we saw no reason for alarm or concern. It was a normal apple orchard, and they're allowed to use these compounds, and they use them. And so the soil samples we took were for a couple of purposes: to look and see what is in the upper couple of feet of soil. So if the civil engineer is doing movement of soil, what do we need to be concerned about? And do we need to manage the soil? Where can it go? And I was kind of surprised at how low the levels were, because we, again, sampled in hotspot areas. And so that's what our plans are to date. I'm going to work with the civil engineer to develop a soil management plan for the management of soils on site and testing. So we make sure, even though the results, the initial preliminary results, and they were just a few samples, were very good, that in the future, if we move any soil, it's managed properly, it goes in the right locations, it's covered. But again, everything on the site was used in accordance with the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth and the US EPA. So there's nothing reportable here under the MCP. There's not a regulated release. It's an apple orchard.
So, I read the report, and the report says that there's enough arsenic to not be able to build houses there. So, if that's the case, so the soil, you said there's not high levels, but to me, if you can't build.
I don't recall making that statement.
We read the report, and it says the reason why the property can't be used for residential purposes is because of the arsenic in the ground. Am I imagining that when we read through the levels of arsenic, so that's why it can't be used for houses?
I remember high levels of arsenic. I don't have the report in front of me, so
So,
You are correct, it did say that single-family homes could not be built on the property.
So
It
you couldn't
also
build,
stated-
that's, I'm remembering on this report, so
Right.
I'm reasoning about the
It also-
arsenic
it
levels,
also-
I'm sorry.
Sorry, it
I'll
also
open
stated
it
that there
up.
was no soil to be removed from the site.
So, so to me, if you can't build the house on it, therefore,
Well-
the soil is pretty poisoned, so.
Yeah, okay, so I think I understand a little bit of the confusion. We did a preliminary study, and you remember, this is a very large property. And we took soil samples in what we call the locations where the most herbicides and pesticides would have been used. I forget the number of acres. How many?
96.
Yeah. So if we go sample one area for a quarter acre and it has a high result, doesn't mean that they can't be removed and you can't build houses. We do this all the time on contaminated sites. This is not, nothing in this report should be construed to say that the entire site is not suitable for residential, because there's many portions of the site. I think what we say in the report is, and we have to say this in accordance with the ASTM standard, is that the use of this report is for redevelopment for commercial purposes. And that's the first thing you say. It's not being, the future intended use is not residential. That's from the get-go. We start from that point. And so if I was looking at this property for redevelopment for residential, I would put another pair of glasses on and get another pen out. And it's a different matter. And residential development in old apple orchards, and you can talk to many of your town planning boards in the area, is an issue that you have to be very careful with, particularly with surface soils.
I'm sorry, I'm just showing him the line, because he doesn't have the report in front of him. So
Yeah,
it says-
oh, okay. Yeah, I mean,
You can read that.
this is almost a boilerplate statement, so I'm sorry to forget it. However, this property is not appropriate for future residential use without further evaluation. I think I say that in almost all my commercial reports when I'm doing a review. That's not unique to this property, and that's just common sense.
You have to understand, as the board who is new to this, I mean,
Right.
that comment means a lot to us.
Right.
So I'm.
Right, so I mean, if I was looking at an old gas station or something, I would say this, make the same statement. There's nothing, I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to confuse you, but that is a generic thing. The standard we're looking at is for commercial reuse only. And so I'm not looking at residential reuse. I don't even evaluate the standards with respect to residential reuse.
Mike, is that accurate? Is that pretty much a boilerplate statement that you've seen, or is it something that you?
I have a little bit of experience working with LSPs on projects, and I think what he's saying is representative from what I've seen. I've had projects, housing projects, residential projects that have been located on former apple orchards, same level of arsenic contamination, if you want to call it that. And soil management plan was developed, and that's how it's dealt with, and it's either removed or left alone, or by any means doesn't mean it's not developable, in my experience.
Can I ask a question to that? You know, most people on Old Worcester Road have wells, and forgive my ignorance because this is not my area of expertise. So if one of the concerns on this report is runoff, and most people have wells, and there's high levels of arsenic coming down off the orchard, well, how does that affect, is it so high that it's dangerous? Is it just high, too high for residential, but not high enough to be of concern? Is it not going to affect the drinking water at all? How does this play out?
I'm not even gonna comment on that, because that's outside of my expertise, really.
That's what I
have an
was-
LSP here you could ask,
So
but.
you have, and I'm not an engineer, you have the arsenic, it kind of settled its way in the ground, and now is it 26 acres, about 30 feet deep, about, you've taken all this dirt and you're moving around all this arsenic. I'm not an engineer, not a scientist.
Right.
Now you're digging up, now it's raining, and the rain comes down, where does all of that poison arsenic go?
It's a complex answer, but I think your first point is a good one. First of all, it's an apple orchard. They spray, I don't know how many times during the season, but every 7 weeks during the season. And they've been doing that for how many years? Where does that go? So I'm asking you kind of the question. That goes in the soil. So far, there's no arsenic in the groundwater. And what we know from the chemistry of arsenic in soils is that it adheres to the soil typically in the upper 2 feet of the soil where it's sprayed, and it stays in that area. The idea that it just percolates down 30 feet to the groundwater it just does not meet science. Now, the other point you made, however, if you dig up the soil and you move it around willy-nilly without proper precautions, would you be creating runoff? And my answer is, without proper soil management plan, proper erosion controls, you could be doing that. Personally, I couldn't say, even though I'm more of an expert than Mike, whether that could ever possibly reach a well. I'm not sure it could ever reach a well unless there was a pathway, but absolutely you need to have a good soil management plan, erosion control, dust control when you develop this project. And that's part of what I'm retained to do, is work with the civil engineer, put those precautions in place. But I guess I'd sit in question. If you sample the wells of arsenic now, and it's not there, why would our development cause it after 30 years of use of arsenic and pesticide?
Have you sampled the wells?
Other people have. We have not sampled the wells, but they've been sampled for drinking water, and the wells on the site are used for drinking water, and they've been used for X amount of years. So they're approved by the town and the state for drinking water.
I have lots of arsenic in my well.
Well, the other thing, the comment I'd make, I don't want to get off on this, but I don't know if you know, Worcester County is one of the few counties in the Northeast that has naturally occurring arsenic. And so you've probably heard that. So as LSPs, we deal with that all the time. What is the arsenic from the pesticides versus what is the arsenic that's naturally occurring? It's a difficult,
So your firm is overseeing the process to make sure that all of the standard practice that you put in place to prevent runoff. So there'll be, and I know that this isn't really our subject tonight, but so that you're starting to dig holes. Can you give me an example of how you prevent the runoff or?
Well, it's actually two of us. It's the civil engineer, Meridian, and myself working together. They're putting in the proper erosion controls that will be required to control any construction project. In addition to that, when we dig soil, we're going to, as part of a typical soil management plan, we will segregate it in areas between 300 and 500 cubic yard lifts, and we will test that soil. It will be covered well, it may be covered, and then we'll decide where it could go. As part of the soil management plan, we may rule out certain areas of the property, maybe that are abutting the neighborhood or that are key runoff areas, and we would not relocate the soil there. But this would be the soil that we disturb. I can't speak to the rest of the site, which is the soil that we don't disturb, that has had arsenic and pesticides sprayed on it for 30 years. I know, so there's two different issues here.
Do you test as you go? Do you retest the soil as you do new?
As we move it, that is the plan. A typical soil management plan is you dig up a pot of soil, you put it in segregated piles, it's all controlled, you test it before you relocate it, and then the soil management plan says you can locate it here or there, and that's what we do.
You'd be storing it on the site?
Yes.
Okay, so nothing, you won't be taking any soil off-site?
I'd have to defer to the civil engineer. That is a cut and fill question, and so I don't know if they have to take soil off-site. If they do have to take soil off-site, I'm gonna have to look at it, test it, make sure it goes to the right places. But I don't know.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet, but I think we're relatively balanced. Yeah, so I mean, we're not talking about millions and millions of cubic yards moving here. We're talking about much smaller amounts that, again, will go through the plan and whether or not they can or can't be relocated. And if they can't, then we'll have to have an alternative plan to move them off-site. And you can speak to, if they can't be relocated, where they would have to go.
Right, we will have to if they have to go off-site, we'll go through a manifesting process and a bill of lading process to see if it can go to a landfill or another area, and not to a residential property.
And you're testing only for pesticides and herbicides? What about, I imagine there are storage tanks there, or were, gas, oil,
Right,
anything like that? Are you testing for that as well?
The soil management plan would identify areas of, we did identify areas of old storage tanks, and if we excavate soil from that area, we would test for those constituents also.
Frank, who has jurisdiction over the soil management plan? Do you
Well-
submit that to the town, or does DEP approve that, or?
Well, that's a good question. I said in the beginning of this is not a reportable site, because pesticides and herbicides under the Massachusetts contingency plan are exempt from reporting, even if they're over some of the reporting standards, as long as they've been used in accordance with the manufacturer's specifications, and we believe that's the case. But Dr. Goldstein has retained me to follow the spirit of the MCP and the soil management plan process, as if we were doing a contaminated site, even though it's not really a contaminated site. So we don't have to submit it to anybody in the DEP. I believe we would have to submit it to the town for approval.
Well, so that comes to conservation. That'd be where to sign.
Conservation is conservation, and then the wetland, any environmental is really, environmental is more, well, it depends. Environmental is, if you look at the definition of what we look at as site plan, environmental issues is something that we would be reviewing as part of the site plan review.
Okay.
So we would.
But it's
That's why we're looking for an environmental specialist. Do we have more questions before we want to open it up? Do we have any of the engineering questions before we?
So some of the wetlands on the property, some of the man-made retention ponds and irrigation ponds, are they staying, are they moving, or are you relocating those, or what's the plan?
I have to defer to Meridian.
Yes, there's two. One has already been approved to be removed for agriculture, and the other one will be part of our conservation commission file, which we plan to do I'm sure it's part of the question, but follow-up question if I can be so bold. We plan to do that after this meeting. We wanted to have some comments from the board because we really didn't, we just heard public comment last time. We wanted to make sure that anything that we hear from you won't invoke any major changes before we bring this forward to conservation. Not that I'm saying you won't change anything, but my point is we could go to straight face with conservation to say that we think this is gonna be what it's going to look like, barring minor comments or what maybe would consider minor changes. So to finalize that, the second man-made irrigation will be looked at to be a removal for filming as part of that process. Other than that, we're not impacting any of the bordering or resource areas.
Sure, I see that.
It'll be within buffer
Those
zone.
ponds that I was curious about.
Yeah, okay.
And any Route 20 access would have to go through wetlands, and you're looking into that?
It would not.
Okay.
It might impact the buffer, but certainly not through a
Okay.
Frank, did you find any evidence of leaking tanks at all, any above or underground tanks? Have you seen any evidence of petroleum contamination?
We have not. The petroleum contamination that we've seen on the site is from an upgradient gas station. I can't remember right now. I don't want to say the company's name in public.
Yeah, we know who it is.
They all know.
But I don't want to say, I can't remember which one it is, because there's so many
They're all the
of them.
same.
Frank, everyone in town knows.
Yes.
Okay, well, I don't remember if it's Cumberland Farms or Exxon or Shell, I just don't remember. But obviously, I've looked at that plume very closely, and it has impacted the site. And very low levels has impacted one or both of the drinking water wells on site, below drinking water standards. And so that's the evidence of what I've seen. I've not seen evidence of a leaking tank on site, although they were there. We did not see that.
So there was gonna be an on-site well here for drinking water for the employees of the facility.
Right.
Do you anticipate that plume migrating further, then it might have an impact on that drinking water?
I've
well?
looked at that, and I believe they're gonna use the existing well. They're not gonna drill a new well. There's two wells. There's one that's closer to the upgrading gas station, and when there's one that's farther away. And I'd have to look at that more closely. Obviously, Dr. Goldstein's concerned about that, and if we had to put treatment on, we would. But that's sampled regularly by the gas station, the person, the responsible gas station. And so far, it's been able to be used for potable water by the existing owner without any treatment, and it's below standards. I think they detected just a couple of compounds at one time well below drinking water standards. But we will look at that. I think and Mr. Scanlon, to answer your question more directly, that is what we call a mature plume, and so it's been remediated. It's not likely to spread. It's probably retracting at this point.
Can I get one of these, just because of the scale, I can't see all the buildings and all the residences. Can we kind of take this page and shrink it down a little bit so I can see all the houses and just kind of at a distance for one of the next meetings, so we can look at that?
Just refer what page it is.
So this page is,
Yeah, thank you.
it's 5 of 15, so it has some of the houses in a good of the building itself. But I want to see kind of take a step back and see where all the houses are on the rest of Old Worcester Road in relation to this building. I just can't.
Can I ask you to flip to the cover, and would that be a suitable scale? And then to have that
Oh,
sheet
the-
5
Oh, yeah.
superimposed onto that?
That's perfect, right, that's great.
Okay.
But this is good, but I can't see where the, how.
Right,
close
they're not
the-
together, I understand, so if I
Thank you.
put them together,
Perfect.
that's what you're looking for?
Thank you very much.
Is there any way you can email that to us so we can take a look at it prior to the meeting?
Yeah.
By the way, they did submit that information that they described tonight in digital form to me, so I will make sure that gets put on the website in the next day or two. Thank you.
All right, so can we open this up or,
I was just gonna say, that any information for the next meeting, prior to the meeting would be good instead of the day of. It's good for us to get a look at that for a couple of days prior to the meeting. So, last minute
we know
documents
this was,
don't help us out.
this was new, so
Yep.
that's,
I don't know whether you want to take it up now or then, but I understand we're going to do certain things at certain meetings. So if you let us know which ones, when, the more lead time we have at each one, to understand the next one is going to be traffic.
yeah,
And then-
we'll have this, Bill and I,
Okay.
talked about it a little bit today. Definitely the next one will be traffic. I think that's the next priority. I think that's, and we'll get a schedule out. We'll have a conversation tomorrow or whatever, or we can have a conversation while we feel and get that
Okay.
to you within, if not today, within the next day or so, just so you have it. With that, I open up to the audience. If you could please keep your questions. I guess now the environmental piece and the stormwater management engineering stuff.
Well, I have a question.
Can you just state your name
Yes,
and address?
Gerard Russell, 63 Old Worcester Road. I have a question for Mr. Lilly. So when the testing was done in the soil for arsenic and other pesticides, how many test sites did you do? I mean, how big is it? Is it bigger than this pumpkin or about the size of the pumpkin? How far down do you dig and how big is the hole?
We use an auger technique, and so the intrusion is relatively small. It's a standard practice that's commonly used, it's a standard of care that's used in most contaminated sites. So I believe we used a 2-inch auger. And you're right, it's a small amount of soil and you auger down and collect a soil sample. It's an old tried and true technique. We went down, I believe, 3 to 4 feet, and we took samples from the upper foot, I don't remember the exact depths, and then lower depths. I think more importantly, and again, this was a limited investigation, is we took
6 sites. you said.
6 sites it was?
is what you
Okay.
said.
Even 6 sites, given the number of acres, is relatively limited,
Exactly,
okay?
that's my
But
point.
the point is, in consulting with Mr. Benjamin, is we targeted areas that had the oldest use of arsenic, the longest history of arsenic usage. And so that is where we typically see it based on my experience in the upper foot of soil where you've been spraying and using arsenic for years, is that's where you see the high concentrations.
So the recollection of the owner who has been there maybe 20, 25 years, was the criteria you used for testing?
For selecting the testing.
For selecting the test areas?
Location.
Okay, so.
The criteria used for analysis is a standard criteria that's used across the country, US EPA methods. That's very commonly used. There was no segregation of the method. We used the standard US EPA method and DEP approved method for analysis of soil for pesticides and herbicides.
So the testing sites that were picked were done at the direction or the guidance of the owner?
The guidance, not the direction. We selected ultimately based on our review of where to sample.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what levels did you find of arsenic?
I don't remember the exact levels right now. It's in the report. It's in the table. I believe we found one level above residential standards. A number of the other levels were below. I believe all the levels were below commercial standards.
Madam Chairwoman, just as a reminder for anybody that needs to know that specific information, that ESA Phase 1 is on the Charlton website. And one thing I also want to add, by the way, is in addition to the Graves comments that were responded to tonight, we also had a number of other comments from like the building department, fire. That was a document that was also brought forward, should be published shortly. as well as all the questions from the audience, from the citizens that were not answered at the last meeting. Questions that were answered, we didn't further answer them, but anything that was unanswered is answered digitally and should be available for distribution.
We have all that, it's just not up yet?
Yes.
Okay.
If you look at our report, you look at table 1, that will have all the locations, will have all the results, all the analysis, and attached to the appendices are the full laboratory reports.
So if this project were to get approval, how many sites would be tested?
Well, again, it's a chicken and the egg thing. It's where are they gonna disturb the soil and move it? Where's the civil engineer? I don't know from their plans where they're gonna do it. But that's what we do with a soil management plan. We then, if soil's gonna be relocated, we would then test it before we relocated it to make sure it was below certain standards, or it should be buried at depth, or could be left at the surface.
So wherever the soil then is going to be disturbed, it would have to be tested?
Yes.
Don't we already know where the building's gonna go? We have, yeah.
Yes, but
They're not final plans, we don't have
Right.
approval yet. Usually this soil remediation plan or management plan comes in as we're finished and moved to construction documents. So
Right.
that we know isn't anything that's going to change other than if there's any design issues. And then that's when Frank will then evaluate what needs to be looked at and where it needs to be looked at. That's typically how we do it now.
So you dig in the area, and all of a sudden you find that somebody's built something really bad 50 years ago, then you have to just come up with a mitigation plan to take care of it. and
that's what the
that's how
soil
it works.
management plan is for, exactly.
So shouldn't the board have the knowledge of what's in the soil before there's any approval given? And I mean, all of the area that's going to be built on?
And that's what we'll bring in we are looking for an environmental specialist, so that they will guide us in exactly what the process is, and hopefully for I'm not sure we'll have one by the next meeting, but the meeting after they'll start reviewing where we've only been looking for a couple of days, so we're looking, Bill, you're looking, you're reaching out for Odor. I made a couple of calls actually for a land environmental specialist, and Bill, if you could also reach out, let's get, and maybe Mike could recommend some people too.
Okay.
Well,
Madam Chairman, the issue of Route 20 access was raised. Can I ask a question regarding that?
Sure.
Has anyone from VGG or the engineering company met with Mass DOT to discuss a curb cut?
Not as of yet.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Not as of yet.
Just curious why that would be, why you haven't done that yet, knowing that there is an interest on the part of the board to have a Route 20 curb cut to limit traffic problems on Old Worcester Road.
Madam Chair, we've re-engaged our traffic engineer to review this possibility and come up with some options. We're just not quite ready to show our final thought to DOT yet. Once we are, we kind of wanted to streamline the process to allow us to get in and get out of there, so to say.
And at
And
our
just
next
for-
meeting,
We're hoping to have an update for you at that point.
Okay.
One final question, Madam Chairman. Have you met with the MIPA staff?
Yes.
And what was their response?
They don't have a response yet. We haven't submitted a formal application yet.
When will
We
you be?
met with them, we got guidance from them, and we'll work on papers and we'll submit them to them.
When do you expect to be submitting paperwork to MIPA?
Maybe within the next 30 days or so.
Thank you.
All right, additional question?
Yes. My name is Ed Kochling. I live on Hanson Road. So I gotta tell you, I'm a little shocked at what I'm hearing. I do have a background in engineering. I work for the city of Worcester. I do have a background with contaminated soils. I managed the Greenwood Street landfill for 10 years, and I also was manager of the soil project with high levels of arsenic over at Nelson Place School, so I am familiar with the process and how things go. So it's sort of shocking that how this site has been characterized to start off with. Basically, there have been 3 samples taken according to their table. One of them was 5 points above the RCS1 limit of 20. It was at 25. It is true that it does have an exemption because it's a pesticide used per the manufacturer's recommendations. However, we're dealing with a site that is 25 acres, I believe, give or take an acre, of disturbance. Typically, how construction sites get started is, they look to harvest the better materials on the site. To, again, moving dirt is extremely expensive. So typically what they want to do is they want to capture all the topsoil, right? Because that's a good product that they can reuse to place down afterwards and everything else. So in this particular case, that's exactly what they're going to be doing. They're going to be scraping up that topsoil. So once you scrape it up, now the problem becomes a dust issue, an airborne issue. And for the question about how do your wells get impacted or the wetlands get impacted, it's the dust. Because what's going to happen is you're up on this plateau, and we know it gets pretty windy in town. It's going to take off, and that dust is what's going to go into the wetlands and into the neighborhoods and cause the contamination of the arsenic. To say that you're going to characterize the soil after you've started construction makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, because it's all about money. So you want to know before you get in here, what the costs are going to be. So to say that we're going to start making little piles and then we're going to test each pile and then we're going to determine where it's going to go, it doesn't sound right to me. I've never seen a job done like that. Typically they go in and they draw a grid. In this case it's 25 acres. I'm guessing maybe 1 sample per acre would be reasonable to characterize the site. Typically in the soils world it's 1 sample per every 500 cubic yards of soil that's going to be excavated. But in this case, because, well, they are going to be, digging down deep. But as the specialist over here said, most of the contamination is probably in the first 2 feet of the soils. If you look at the geotechnical report, it says that the soils in general below the subsoil area it's glacial till. Is going to be extremely difficult to build on. As a matter of fact, they have to build on it during dry periods because if it gets wet, it's going to be too soupy and sloppy to work on. And my guess is that if any contaminants were leaching through the topsoil layer, they pretty much got stopped in that layer, you know what I mean? So they didn't migrate down. So if you can picture this project, you're actually, you're going down 22 feet, right? We're cutting off the plateau and we're taking all the materials and we're going to push them to the sides to make a bigger plateau so that we can, they can put the 1 million square foot building. So to kind of say, hey, you know what, we're going to characterize this after the fact is in my opinion, is an attempt to hide what's going on out there. I think that, the last meeting was about, 3-4 weeks ago? They had plenty of time. They should have been out there, and this site should have been characterized, number 1. And here's the danger. The danger is this: the minute you start pushing these soils up into stockpiles, and they get dusty, especially during the summer. Okay, so there's a small construction site that makes loom right on the edge of Carroll Hill Road where I live. And as you know, when you're coming home at night and the wind kicks up, it's the Sahara Desert dust storm, right? So what do you think is going to happen on a hill that's 25 acres, which is probably 150 times bigger than that little parcel? It's going to get really ugly, and it's going to be very dangerous, because now you're taking soils that are probably very high levels of arsenic. Because here's the thing: they don't have to report it because it's over the limit, because of the exemption that they get. That doesn't change the fact that it's over the limit. So there's only 3 samples taken. We know 1 was at 25. Plus, that information, just so you know, was not available until last week, until I called up to the planning board, and they were gracious enough to hunt it down and get it. But both the table with all that information as well as the figure 4 that shows you where they took the samples was not available. However, I got it, which was great. It just shows that I think it's at the north side of the site they took 3 samples. Quite frankly, he mentioned that they do an auger test. They go down, the guy comes in, he kicks the auger, they wind it around a couple of feet deep, they pull it out, they put it in a bag, and they take it to the lab. That's like less than a needle in a haystack to tell us that, oh, well, when we get here and we actually start working after all our approvals, then we'll deal with that. That's bad business. I would recommend that the board requires them to have a soil management plan in place before they get started, so that they, it's agreed to, and there's no misunderstanding of how they're going to deal with it, because you're going to have water trucks to keep the dust down, you're going to have tarps on the material. If you do characterize the site properly, who knows what turns up there? It's an old farm. We all know that there's been all sorts of different things there are on sites.
So, I want to answer. None of us are engineers, and that's why we're looking for a consultant to help us with that. We don't. We don't. So it's fun.
Well, let me just respond if I could. I think you brought up.
Yeah, I was gonna, Madam Chairwoman, the peer review, we welcome that opportunity to be able to address this specific question.
So,
And I would just say you brought up a lot of valid points that we would like to address.
Bill, we'll definitely, again, I just want to reiterate, can we really focus on bringing these consultants in? I know we probably should have been a little more aggressive over the last few weeks, but can we really pretty much make all the calls and have them in place? I'd love to have these, as we go through odor, obvious environmental, the land test, that environmental attorney that we're talking about, if we could just start making these calls. I've also made some, and let's make sure that we're better prepared to have our staff on, our consultants on site.
Can I make a suggestion as well? Would you mind putting your concerns in writing so we can make, I know they're gonna do a peer review, but that way everything is addressed.
So I did take the time to write down my concerns at this point in time, because you have to understand too, that the plans that were submitted were extremely preliminary. Okay, so it kind of gets you started and says, okay, this is the location, this is the kind of thing that they want to do. But to be honest with you, they were missing, really all the details, and they just really bring the plans to the meeting when we're here, and it really doesn't give you any chance whatsoever to absorb them. I realize that Mr. Andre, he's done a great job of looking at his comments. He had 50 comments, but as he mentioned, a lot of those were procedural things like, hey, you need a set of 40 scale plans. Well, quite frankly, I'm a little disappointed that those regulations and those rules for the town and those bylaws and all those things, they're what the engineering firm is supposed to be starting with and saying, okay, we have to meet all these things. They kind of came in with a full set of plans that doesn't meet any of those things. So now we're back to wasting everybody's time to go back to talk about those.
We just want to keep it to questions.
I understand.
we're
So,
not here till-
well, she asked me the question. So the answer to the question, I have submitted my questions, okay, to the chair, and I hope you guys can take a look at them. It's sort of my first shot at it, kind of. So I have a few other things that I've
Whenever
noted.
our board is open, you're always, you can walk into an office. It's probably great to make an appointment to look at whatever.
No, actually, I actually went, I purchased my own set of plans. I went and I have printed because as a reviewer, I have to review plans for a living too. It's very important to be able to see the full set of plans versus looking on the computer, because you just get a grasp of really what's going on much better. So while I have the floor, I wanted to also address a few other issues, if that's okay. Is that right? Yes, so basically at the beginning, there wasn't some talk about odor that was brought up. And so here's the thing.
We have to just focus on the order. We're going to have a whole.
Well, this is very important. It'll only take 30 seconds, one line, okay? So I would implore you guys, okay, to visit an active marijuana medical grow facility. There is one in Worcester, okay, on Route 20. I happen to be dealing with them with a city project, but they came to me and asked me a few questions to help them with some of their environmental problems. And one of them is odor. It is a really, really bad problem, and they realize it and they recognize it. And to their credit, they owned up to it and said, look, there's no way to really control this. the amount of air that they have to move in the building is 3 to 10 times a day, that the air, and they have a 7,000 square foot grow facility. We're talking here about a million square feet grow medical facility. You're talking about moving air, and not pleasantly smelling air. It actually smells like skunk.
Is that the one off of 122? That's
No,
the one over
yes,
122?
correct.
I sent my husband to that one, so.
Yeah, okay.
yeah,
So I guess my point is that this is a serious matter, because odor is gonna affect not only the neighbors, okay, but I believe it will also affect our schools, because, you know, we have kids all around there. The schools are, as the crow flies, about a mile away, downwind. And if we have an odor problem at our schools, this town is going south in a big hurry. Because let me tell you something about the schools in this town. That's what brought me to this town. My son went to the schools here. He actually flies the NASA space station. That's what he does for a living, right out of college. And what prepared him for college was Shepherd Hill and the elementary schools in this town. So without a doubt, those are the most important. That's our gold nugget, is our school system and our schools and our kids. And we need to make 100% sure we are not fooling around with anything anywhere near them. So, you know, one of the things I would say is no matter what, there needs to be a bond in place for odor mitigation, okay? And this business of having a bond, just so you know, is a waste of time. Having a company post a bond, you forever and a day, you'll be chasing a bond company.
No, they post cash bonds?
Yes, well, so it would be a cash bond or a letter of credit, which is what I would recommend. When you just have the regular.
That's standard practice,
Oh, very good.
and I'm sure that's probably standard practice for this.
I mean, if we have an odor issue, we need to be able to snuff it out instantly. There should be no misunderstanding. So, back onto the engineering topics. The other big thing here for stormwater is your recharge systems and the water usage. It seems to me that we don't have the necessary utilities in this area to accommodate this size of a facility. One of the things that I learned from my tour of the manufacturing facility in Worcester was that, and the reason why they called me was because of the condensation that they produce. So it turns out marijuana plants, as they put it, sweat. And they produce about 0.28 gallons, a little over a quarter gallon of condensate per square foot, because they have 7,000 square feet, and they have to discharge 2,000 gallons a day. So when you work the numbers, that's what it comes out to. So when you look at a 1 million square foot facility and you do the math, you're looking at about, 250,000 gallons of condensate that you have to handle and deal with. Right now, they're doing testing on it to see if they can put it down the drain, or would they have to put it in the sewer system. And if it has to go into the sewer system, that is going to be a huge nut to crack.
I have, you guys will open to answer that, but I have that on one of my items of questions when we get further down the road, and I did kind of chat with Todd about it a little bit, and I'm assuming that there'll be systems in place to, if the water can't be disposed of, it would be cleansed before it was disposed, correct?
Yes,
There
ma'am.
could be systems in place to cleanse that.
So what you're talking about water quality.
Yeah, we're not disposing of any water. Like, comparing it to the Worcester facility is great, but the whole point of this project is that's exactly what we're not doing. Everything is self-contained, everything is recaptured, everything is reuse. It's like, is it like 85%?
Yes, ma'am. So our narrative contradicts a lot of the things that were just said. So we do have also mechanical engineer. So this goes in line with the cogeneration, the cooling tower, mechanical system. Basically dehumidification process and cooling is all handled together, and that would be a good topic for that particular time. And again, I don't understand the utilities comment, but we have been having discussions with the water department and utilities that are in the immediate vicinity, and we do feel that we are appropriately, we'll have the appropriate utilities for what we need to do.
So Madam Chair, that comes to all the other parts, that there's no point in going forward with a lot of discussion on things until you get the main, basic, major things resolved. Have they applied or given a sewage discharge permit form? Have they filled out the gallonage and all those things that, because they should have those numbers now.
I will,
You know.
there is, within a week, all chairs of all boards, or directors of all boards, there will be a meeting, and we will all touch base, because we're all kind of siloed, and so I have reached out to have everybody sit in the same room to make sure that all of these items will be addressed, that it won't be missed in any way, so that will happen.
The point that I'm making about, for example, just domestic water. So, obviously, you know, the original plan showed domestic water coming from Route 20, but it turns out to be a dead water main. Okay, there's no water in it. So you can't do a flow test or a pressure test. This building that they're building, per state building law, is actually comes under manufacturing. It's a manufacturing facility. So it has to meet the state, the state building code regulations and codes for fire safety, which means it's going to require sprinklers. So you need a lot of water for sprinklers for a 1 million square foot facility. And going, I realize that there is a water project going by on Old Worcester Road, an 8-inch water main. But just so you know, what's going to happen here, in my opinion, is that they're going to, they put sprinklers in order to make them all run. They're going to have to put a fire pump system in because they're elevated, and I'm pretty sure that the pressure is not going to be enough in the 8-inch line for a 1 million square foot building. Which means, of course, when you have a fire pump for a manufacturing building, or any building for that matter, you have to actually run it twice a year, I believe, is the code, to flush the system, make sure it's working and everything. And so when they kick that thing on, every neighbor who's tied into that water main for domestic water is going to have ugly looking water for a day or two, because what happens is it's going to turn up the system, because it basically pulls the water at probably 200 pounds per square inch of flow. So it's going to put a hardship on everybody that ties into the new water.
Water sewer will be looking at that, correct?
Yes.
And that's something we
Okay.
haven't.
I just wanted to bring it to your attention that it's not so simple. It's not, there's a lot to this, and I think that people don't realize, like I said, now you have to meet these manufacturing requirements by building code, which means sprinklers. And sprinklers, again, that's another total different kind of animal. So you're going to need that volume, and you're going to need the pressure, and if you start installing a fire pump and all the things that go with it, it could be really detrimental.
Right, so we want to stick to our engineering.
So then stormwater would be, is that okay to talk about
Yes,
stormwater?
stormwater is great.
So my question would be,
Before he moves on,
Could we have a chance to
can we
kind of-
just clarify some of those points that you
Yeah,
just laid out?
before you,
well,
Absolutely.
may I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just very general, the utility layout was something that went over in our DRT meeting prior to our first submittal with the town. Public Works suggested that layout, getting water in from the 12-inch on Worcester Road, so that's something that.
And we've had subsequent
Yeah.
meetings with the Southbridge Water Department as well as the Charlton Water Department.
So that's definitely an ongoing thing that we're working with them to make sure that we don't do anything detrimental. Also, the entire facility will not be sprinkled. It is the head house.
That'll be finally determined with further discussions with the building inspector and the deputy fire chief as to what exactly is sprinkled. But yes, there will be sprinkler systems, and as we discussed at the last meeting, recirculating water for fire suppression, backflow preventers, and things that would be required to protect the surrounding community's water supply. So there's not those issues.
And the sewer flows will be based on, and I'll bring some of those preliminary numbers in the next meeting, but they'll be based on just employee use. There's no other waste other than domestic from the employee use within the facility.
This is now a little bit off subject.
It is, I just wanted to.
So you're collecting the rainwater, and you're using the rainwater to make the system work.
Some.
Correct? So, and then it kind of stays in the closed loop and gets recycled and used to the best. So there's no waste. first thing that comes to my mind, and it's been sitting in my mind for a while, so I'll ask, because you guys may have an answer. So all that water that normally goes into the ground and kind of feeds the wetlands and feeds all the streams and all the rivers and everything, now how does that water that's all being collected and used, how do all those streams and how do they get kind of replenished when you're collecting all that water that normally replenishes them?
Sure. I think I can clarify some of that. Based on the Mass DEP stormwater standards, we have to recharge a minimum of 65% of the proposed impervious on site, which I propose we're doing. Some of that stuff is still being worked out in terms of Mike's review, but the intent of that is there. So to answer that first question of how do the streams and the wetlands get fed, there is still 65% of that impervious that is being recharged into the ground. The remainder, and I believe we're at 65-35, but the remainder is then being used to feed this closed loop system. Now again, it doesn't rain every day, so there'll be a point in time where it's not being fed for a little while, so that's when the backup systems of the water and the reuse of the evaporation and so on and so forth comes into play. And that's, I'm getting out of my area, that's not my area, that's Mike's.
Yeah, that'll be,
Yeah, so but to speak strictly to the recharge, there is a requirement that we have to meet, which Mike's reviewing, but is part of our submission.
Madam Chair, so may I chime in on that? Because we're talking stormwater now, which is good. So recharge systems. Okay, a couple of things that I see that need attention with the recharge systems. Number one, they're placing them in a spot where they really haven't done any test, perk tests or anything, because it's 22 feet below, because they're going to come in, cut this plateau off and push stuff down to the sides to get this plateau big enough for the 1 million square foot building. So they haven't done any perk tests of that soil to see will these recharge systems work. Is that correct, Mr. Andre? Correct, okay. So you don't know if you can actually recharge or not right now because you have to get down there and do those tests. Now, from looking at the geo report, the geotechnical report, it's saying that it's glacial till and that you can't really, it's difficult material to deal with because once it gets wet, it gets gooey like clay and kind of gummy and doesn't want to percolate water. It doesn't want to dry out. So that's telling me that I'm pretty sure by the time they get down there that these massive underground recharge systems aren't going to work. As far as how the wetlands are fed right now.
I think we need to do comment or question and answering it. I think we're getting kind of before we have committed. So do we want to comment?
Well, one of those comments was, one of Mike's comments was the additional testing, which I asked at the beginning I spoke to, that we would work offline to figure out what we need to do to satisfy his comment. And then I think that will lead into an answer to that additional question that was just asked. So
and all of Mike's comments, and even if they're left open or whatever, they're always part of the final conditions. So everything, we pretty much treat everything that he says as
He's a good engineer, right? He does a good job.
So that that'll be addressed.
So I guess, again, I'm sort of just the harsh reality of what I'm seeing here. So we don't know right now if the recharge systems will work. So what's the backup plan for that? So I would say, what happens if you can't recharge there? What's the backup plan? Okay, so that would be, one of the thoughts that I have. Number two, part of the water that they're recharging to meet their stormwater quotas for recharge is the parking lot water. Okay, but typically parking lot water is not really good water to recharge because it's contaminated. You know what I mean? You have oils, greases, all sorts of other things in it, and when they go into your recharge system, you're putting that into the ground, and that's not really a good idea. Now I realize that they have, they're not using a storm scepter. They're using this other type of device that helps meet the criteria of the 80% temporary, suspended solid removal. However, I don't believe that unit does anything for oils and greases. So for example, if they have some kind of truck up here and there's an oil spill or something like that, it goes into the basins, it's gonna go right out of those and right into your recharge system, which you don't want. So I would recommend that they look at using a Vortectic unit, one of these other type of units that actually has storage for oil to remove any oils and contaminants like that before it goes into the recharge chambers.
Is that accurate?
They can speak to the system proposing.
So, that was two different questions, so which question?
Just explain the system that you're proposing.
Yeah, I mean, he's correct that we're meeting the standards in terms of TSS removal. If we're going to talk about an accident or a spill, I mean, that's something that I feel like isn't part of the requirements. I don't really want to speak to that. He mentioned a truck leaking oil. And yes, of course, that could happen. I mean, we don't.
Employees have cars that leak oil, whatever, so what?
Of course, yes,
Yeah.
and we've, as far as excuse me, as far as the stormwater standards are concerned, we've met all of them, and we're still under review, and obviously we'll meet any other comments that come up in our finalization of that review, but we're meeting all our standards that are required at this point. We could certainly reevaluate and see if we feel there's any need for anything additional based on those comments.
So then the next stormwater.
Just wait, one second, let me just finish writing my.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. I think they're all waiting for him to do his, all right, go ahead.
So the other thing that I noticed on their water system, recharge system, and everything else is there's no, there doesn't seem to be an outlet. So for example, we've had a lot of rain lately, and since they're reusing, you know, like the engineer said, that they're recycling all their water and all this kind of stuff, and you know, the initial thought is like, well, geez, you know, what happens if it stops raining and we have a drought? Then, you know, they should be sufficient enough with what they have retained in their system. But what happens when it rains and snows here in large quantities? Because we have had quite a few storms. I mean, my wheelbarrow at home has 6 inches in it just from last week. So where is, you know, once these systems are full, now where's all that water going to go, and how's that going to be treated, and how's that going to get, you know, managed?
Typically, we propose emergency overflows at the downspouts of the buildings to allow for any instances like that. But these systems are designed to handle up to the 100-year storm. So typically, even a back-to-back storm with the siding up to the 100-year is usually adequate in almost all cases. The wheelbarrow example doesn't account for the exfiltration that's happening, and that happens as the water is entering tips as well. So the standards are kind of built up to understand those situations and account for them. And I believe that Charlton does not have anything above and beyond the stormwater standards at this point in time. Conservation, I'm sure, may have questions as well. So I would say that as of right now, I feel like we're meeting all the requirements.
So this isn't about requirements. This is just about the facts that, you know, you have this closed system that they're claiming they have, these underground cisterns, right? And when they get full, because you gotta remember, they're never being emptied. They're claiming that they're recirculating and reusing them. So they're always gonna be full. What happens when they get over full? Where does so all of a sudden they're at capacity and we get a big rain event or a snow event or something. Where does all that water go now? Because now you have 25 acres of water that's gonna go, what's it gonna go down the road? I can't go down into the catch basins because that's gonna overwhelm your underground recharge systems. It's gotta go down the slopes now. And so when it goes down the slopes, chances are it's gonna erode those and right into the wetlands. So I guess what I'm looking for is where I would ask the board to consider is asking, you know, these guys to, what's the backup mechanism here? You know, what happens when their system is full? You know, where's all that water gonna go? Because I mean, in one hand they're saying, hey, we're gonna recharge with our own condensate, and you know, we have these cisterns and we're good for a 100-year storm, but yikes, it's gonna fill up, and once it's filled up, now what happens? So you know, that's the other end of it, or the other extreme that's gonna happen. So there needs to be some means for that stormwater, and it's a lot of it because you know they're basically capturing 25 acres of it. So one point I'd like to make, because it came up, your question about how the wetlands get fed and replenished. You had that question earlier.
Can you answer this question?
Sure.
Madam Chair, I'm honestly confused. Are we talking about the cisterns for holding the recycled water or the underground systems? I lost the comment.
Okay,
I honestly, I don't understand the question.
So when your cistern in your internal water system is full, okay, so the cistern's at capacity, and your condensate has been, recaptured and reused. Now you have like this closed loop, and everything's full. Now it rains, and you have 25 acres of roof going into a cistern that's full. So where's all that water gonna go? Where's all that overflow gonna go? It can't go into the parking lot and into the recharge systems, because chances are they're gonna be full too. I don't think they're sized for 25 acres of rooftop, okay? So, because they would be taking the rooftop, the parking lots, and anything that's impervious on the site. So there needs to be some sort of backup system here where all this water's gonna go. Like I said, when your system's full. I don't think that's confusing.
This month I think it would have been.
So, okay, so, and I realize it doesn't show it on your plans, and I'm bringing it up so that you guys can address it before, we get in the middle of this thing and there's a really big problem. Nobody seems to be answering that question.
I have to be honest, I think I understand, so I'm gonna make an attempt here, but I have to be honest, I'm not still sure. I think what I heard was what happens when everything's full, for lack of a better term, when everyone, couple things. One, the cisterns are being used daily. They're pulling 30+ thousand gallons a day.
30,000, 25 to 30,000 gallons.
And again, we're getting into a different system for me, but not all of that water comes back, because the plants are going to absorb some of it, for sure. But again, I can't speak to that because I don't know the entire closed loop system, how that works. So we're assuming now that the cisterns are full and the underground systems are completely full, and then it's still raining. That's the scenario I think we're talking about. At that point, we're past a 100-year storm, everything's full, and the systems will have emergency overflows in the rooftops, and yes, there'll be runoff. There's just no way around that. That kind of event is, I'm not even sure how that happens, to be honest with you. I mean, it would have to be back-to-back 100-year storms. And if that's the case, I think we're in trouble. Everyone. Yeah, no, we don't engineer for catastrophic events.
Nor would I point out that the town regulations require that, nor does any other project in town. It's a catastrophic event.
Quite frankly, you're just trying to mislead the board here on this one, because it's not a catastrophic
It's 9
event.
o'clock, and we have other things.
It's very
that are
common
on
sense
our-
oriented.
On our agenda. So obviously, we're not done with questions, and we're not done with this. How do we want to, do we just want to?
And it's Ted?
It's Ed.
Ed, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
If Ed could submit those to the board?
So I have
Okay.
that.
So you do have that?
in email.
So in interest of time, maybe we look at that and we address that with them and give them a copy of
What
that.
I'll do
Yeah, if we
is,
could get a copy, that'd be great.
I think I did forward it, but I will forward it again, and we can print them all out, and we can submit them to get them all addressed. And
Sure.
Get that, the
Well,
answers.
I mean, some of them don't need to be addressed, but some of them are just telling you what needs to be required, because, like I said, I'm in this line of work, and I'm seeing what's going on here. And I gotta tell you, it's disappointing, because I don't think that they're really telling the board, everything on and up. I mean, it's like how the wetlands get fed. That was one of your questions. How do they get fed? Well, it's very simple how they get fed. Right now, what happens is all the water is surface water that's coming off the hill going.
But you're not telling us anything that we don't know. We know we need to get an engineering, we need to get an environmental consultant, and we know this, and we are very aggressively working on that. It's just not as simple
No,
to just find,
I understand.
you know. Is there a few more, and,
Gentleman in the back.
sir?
Yes, John Smith, 136 Roselle Road. Just back to the soils where we kind of started here. So if there's 25 acres, say, to be disturbed for construction, and you're saying the 2 feet of you gotta assume on a farm, there's 2 feet, there's a foot and a half of maybe loam or topsoil, and maybe typically it's maybe 2.5 feet of a foot of subsoil before you get to the glacial till. So if you do the math roughly, that's If it's contaminated, and two things, if it's contaminated, it's like 80,000 cubic yards of material that would be contaminated on site. That material typically, if they're cutting, leveling, filling, is pretty useless to them because it's not structural. They would never be able to use that on site. So going back to the soil management point of that, you're gonna have 80,000 cubic yards of stockpiled material all around this job site that's probably not gonna be used for anything because it's not structural. You couldn't build on it, you couldn't put a parking lot on it, you couldn't, I mean, you'd minimally use it on site. So that, I don't know what soil management's, there'd have to be a pretty tight soil management program for it to successfully work. Typically, it will get shipped off site because it's useless. It will have to get deposited to probably a unmined landfill somewhere.
So we will want a complete soil management plan.
That's a mountain of material. Another thing is, once you start moving around, yes, it's arsenic, it's that, it's not residential, it's approved for commercial use. But once you start moving around and the rain hits it, then it goes into residential areas. So now you're dealing with, yeah, it's fine where you have it now, but when it's draining down into Old Worcester Road where the people have the wells and everything, then it's a problem. And there's no erosion control that says, well, this is arsenic and you stop here. It all goes with the water. So it's pretty, it's a challenge for them to build on that site as it stands right now.
Do you have additional questions? I have a question.
Oh, go
No,
ahead.
you go ahead, John.
No, you first.
Are you sure?
Yes.
All right, has anybody, this is for the VGG folks, I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, Kristen Kastigian, Carol Hill. Has anybody from VGG contacted the Tennessee gas line concerning connecting to the high pressure gas line on the property?
Yes.
What's the status?
We're working on it.
What does that mean?
It's in progress.
Okay, so I guess my understanding of the gas line is that it's a high pressure end-to-end transportation line. It's not distribution to homes and businesses. In order to tap into that, what is required?
So that would be Vanderwild Engineering,
Yeah.
who is not here tonight because they were not supposed to be here tonight. But we can ask them to address that at the next meeting at which you schedule gas as a discussion point.
There is a very extensive process for working with distribution level high pressure lines.
Do you guys have approval to tap into that line?
Again, that's, as I said, that's in process, and we can have our consultant discuss that on the night that gas is scheduled.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And we will have kind of an end-all that will probably include utilities and kind of everything that we didn't address with the other items we will have. I have one other question regarding the cooling tower that is gonna be 10 feet below grade now. How many cooling towers are you guys proposing to need?
So we're not stating that it has to be 10 feet below grade. Part of it will be below grade, but the exact dimensions of the, can the question please be repeated? I'm sorry.
Absolutely, I'm sorry. So I thought that earlier you described that the 35-foot tower would be 10 feet below grade, so the height would actually be 25 feet above grade. And then I just wanted to know, how many towers are you proposing to need to cool your system?
So we can get the exact number of towers. So the process of engineering the system lower to the ground includes putting part of it under below grade, but also part of the engineering of it is you can make it smaller and taller, or make it shorter and a little bit larger. So depending on the loads and the load calculations of the whole facility, and the use of the code generation is what determines it. So it's really sharpening the pencil on the engineering to be able to define the exact configuration of the cooling towers. And we would certainly like to have our engineer explain that, and be happy to at the future meeting.
Did you say that there was? We have small renditions, and that we'll share with you. We'll actually get them.
When you say renditions, do you mean blueprints, or do you mean just like an image?
Image renditions.
Okay, I was looking more for the blueprint. Thank you.
Excuse me, Madam Chairman, so I just want to follow up. So at this point in the plans, how many towers exist for that plant? Is it 1 or 2 or 3?
We'll have to get back to you on that. We don't have the final number right now.
Why are we reviewing the site plan if they don't even know how many towers? It's just a general, I'm baffled.
We learn as we go. No, we'll.
Thanks.
So, Madam Chair, since we're talking about towers, so I have a question. Is there any, they are going to be doing manufacturing of the marijuana plants on this site, correct? And part of that is processing the plants into a medical product. Is that right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So, are there going to be any smokestacks at the site?
No.
No. So how, I mean, I just took a crash course in marijuana, medical marijuana production, and it turns out that they have to use solvents and bake the solvents off of the product and all these things. So is that going to be all handled internally, or is there going to be some sort of stack where you can get release the solvents and things like that?
You're gonna have to have ovens of some sort. How are you gonna release?
We have experts and engineers that have worked through all of this, and some of that's outlined in the HVAC and odor control plan. There's stacks for the cogeneration plan, and there's an exhaust and emissions design that's based around that. These are all great questions, and we look forward to answering them when we have the appropriate team with us. We just weren't prepared for those questions.
You guys said that at the last hearing. I just want to point that out.
And just for clarity, for tonight's hearing, we were instructed who to bring as a team.
Yeah,
And in order to keep this on the time schedule.
That is engineering. Everything Mike outlined was engineering.
And then we kind of slipped into the environmental a little bit just because of the consultant was here, and I apologize, and we'll.
Building and maintaining is all engineering. I have to
Sure.
bring it too.
This is site engineering tonight.
So
It would be difficult to ask them to bring their entire team here every night, so there is another meeting set up for those particular stuff.
We will, and
So
we'll
just-
get
you
that
gotta be
schedule
patient
out
with
so
the process.
everybody knows exactly what we're talking about. And, I mean, obviously, we sway, but we'll get that out. We just.
So, Madam Chair, does erosion controls come under tonight's heading for engineering, site engineering? So I didn't see anything in Mr. Graves or Mr. Andre's report regarding the erosion controls. Again, looking at what they have for erosion controls, which is basically a double compost sock at the bottom of a 300-foot, and I can't tell if it's 3-to-1 slope or 2-to-1 slope because the plans were 100 scale. Is that considered adequate? Because, I mean, I've been on a lot of jobs, and I gotta tell you, that isn't, the downshoots that they have proposed are just gonna be a disaster. Is there any, were there anything written about that? Did you review that?
That will be covered in conservation. So that will be.
Okay, so
Right, is it-
the issue that comes with that though is, so what's gonna happen is they're gonna go to conservation and they're gonna go, oh, you need to put some settlement ponds in, you need to do this, you need to do that. And then what's gonna happen is that's gonna kick them back into here because they're gonna have to change their plans and their site plan and everything else. So usually what these guys, the engineers do is they have an erosion control plan that's pretty thorough, you know what I mean, that really looks like it's, has a high chance of succeeding through conservation. Right now, the plan that they have has a zero chance of going through conservation. I mean, it's just, like I said, it's 2 compost sites, it's less than a hay bale going around a 25-acre site. So I would ask that and I'll put it in my paperwork, I'll send to you guys a list of things, but I would ask that they provide, the proper erosion control plan.
I'll be meeting with Todd too.
Okay, great.
So we have a representative from all the boards in the town. We'll all meet, and I'll make sure specifically that I get that.
Right, so, because like I said, I've experienced that before, where what happens is they end up bouncing back and forth between boards because what they're proposing isn't adequate. It's fair to say that the erosion controls on this original set of plans is basically something that they're drawing a line around the thing with a couple of angles. It's just not gonna work. They're gonna need some temporary settlement basins on site. They're gonna have some moats going around these slopes to slow the water down. And they're gonna have some forebays involved so that they can put flocculant in to keep the dirt levels down. There's a lot to it.
John in the front?
Yes, Madam Chairman. Quick question, this is going pertaining to water and wastewater.
Name, please.
John Duso, 153 Old Worcester Road. Getting back to your influent, 30,000 gallons per day. Is that a good average number that you're looking at? Or is it 85% of that, because you're talking about hydroponic technology?
That's approximately the new, I just have to look through the narrative to get the exact number, just for consistency, but that's
Yeah, so it's definitely, it's not 4,500 gallons per day. I'm using, it's 30,000.
That's the new water requirement coming into the system.
Okay. Now the waste of that, none of the waste, even after a clean in place, you're gonna have to clean the ROs, for example. That's gonna get put back in the system, retreated, and then reused? Or is that gonna get put down to the sewer system?
No, it's not going into the sewer, so in the plan that we've communicated to the water and sewer department, no, not, there's no industrial processed water intending to be discharged into the sewer at this time. It's commercial water. We can provide a flow diagram, closed loop diagram that might be helpful to answer some of these questions. And that we propose to do that as part of the mechanical and energy systems future discussion.
Okay.
That might be helpful to answer that question.
Right, and maybe in the future, just the actual system, the water treatment system, so that it can be studied in better detail.
Yes, there's a very extensive water treatment.
Sure.
Is part of this. The level of purity of the water that's required for this operation is much higher than drinking water standards. And the recycling and processing of that, as well as recycling water that has been used, is quite valuable to the operation. That's why it's such a high requirement to recycle it.
Right, so the wastewater, for example, from the RO, it's 85%, actually it's 75% recovery, 25% usually in the industry. 25% is gonna get captured, put back to the front end and refiltered by another part of the system. That was the other question I was gonna have. Does that make sense? Because the RO, you're gonna get permeate, clearly. That's, gonna be to that standard. But there's 25% of a high brine solution that's gonna have to go back into the system and be reprocessed, right? Right. Can't go down the drain.
The RO specifically is for a certain portion of the water.
Right.
It's, rainwater doesn't necessarily require RO. So these are questions maybe we could cover. I'd like to have our water expert come and speak to that. I could speak to it, but I'd rather have the right person.
No problem, thank you.
Would you please provide the flow diagram and whatever details that you can, so we can, we're trying to be as transparent with our public as possible, and, so, we don't want to be hiding any, and honestly, we are here without a permanent planner and with one consultant, and so if we can get a lot of eyes on it, it's actually pretty helpful to us. And so whatever you have, the flow diagram, so just so we can understand the system. So
is the concern essentially to understand where the water is going to originate from?
Where is it going to come from? How is it? And I guess
I need to mainly need to understand how far to go with this, because so much of this is just kind of what I would say maybe beyond what planning board. But there's engineering that happens throughout this that we're happy to share. We just don't want to inundate you.
I don't need to know that, that in detail, but if we can, if you can submit what you think we should know, and then we have more questions we can ask.
tests in one. Why would that be on the purview of the cleaning board? You guys are supposed to make sure that there's actually enough utilities to serve everything.
I just water is
So,
a utility.
if I, can I, I'm
We
gonna
just
see if I
wanna-
can concisely, you're looking at it as equipment in the production or equipment in the operation of a building or a company. Your concern is, we wanna know utility usage and inflows and outflows. So you wanna know things that are coming from the community or being placed back into the community. So, to the extent that those things are related to the equipment that's operating either the building or the business within the building, to the extent that they touch utilities that touch the community, you want to understand how they have an impact on it. If I'm paraphrasing you correctly, okay, I understand what you're looking for.
So we want to make sure that clean, if water is being, used for recharge, that it's clean and, that kind of stuff, so.
Yes.
And again, we're new at this is the first, the biggest, and there's not very many examples to follow, so, have a little bit of, patience with our board, just trying to do our job.
Oh, yes, ma'am, thank you.
And we have residents that live close and are kind of scared, so also, I get your side, but, our job is for these guys over here. Any other questions?
In their narrative, they claim that they were gonna do bokashi fermentation, but that's all they claim. Is that coming to you guys too at a different time, or who does that go to? It's basically, they're talking about recycling all of their, all of the plants in this bokashi fermentation and doing an industrial scale composting type of operation. They mentioned it last time I brought it up, that the pods they were using, the rock wool, was not biodegradable. So where does that stand? Did they add more information this time in the packet that they just delivered to explain that a little better, or is there any more information on it?
Additional, is it
Yeah.
in the questions that were?
Yes, ma'am, so we addressed both of those questions and submitted, so for example, for the rock wool, we submitted the material safety data sheets, environmental compliance statement. It was concerned about safety, and I believe that those data sheets clarify that. They're perfectly safe products to be using in this application. With respect to, sorry, I just blanked on the other question.
The fermentation.
For the bokashi fermentation, we have a summary narrative of why we're proposing this as part of the innovation of this facility, and what is the backup plan if we determine that bokashi is not the right solution for this. There's certainly a backup plan. The backup plan is just, it's an industry standard, but the city of Denver has found that the bokashi fermentation process is an industry best practice that they're trying to promote to avoid waste crops going into landfills, essentially.
Did you see the responses to those questions posted yet?
No, I have not.
So-
But I have to disagree with the statement. I mean, it specifically says
So
that
just
rock
went
wool
today,
is
so
not
you-
biodegradable, so
if you
I don't know
will-
how you compost it.
We'll let you read the response, and
Okay.
again, that's actually on my punch list for, I think a lot of that stuff will be lumping in with utilities and stuff at the end. Once we have a schedule, we'll make sure that we address that a little bit more to get a feel, to make sure that there isn't a lot of waste being disposed of. I guess making sure that the waste gets disposed of in the correct way and stuff like that.
I mean, bokashi fermentation sounds great, but when you ask the questions, the key questions, for example, they claim that they were gonna, basically use the rock wool and dispose of it in the bokashi fermentation. Well, it's not biodegradable, so you can't do that. How much of this are you gonna have? A ton, or 10 tons, or 50 tons? And on their plans and renderings, they don't show any place that I could see where where are they keeping this, and how are they processing this? This isn't, what I read about bokashi fermentation, it's great for a homeowner to put in a little bucket. But when you get into industrial scale, now you're talking much more odors, you're talking much bigger area that's required. It requires somebody who knows what they're doing, so that you don't cause other problems, get people sick, because it obviously is giving off enzymes and fungus and bacteria and all those things. So I'm not so sure, like I said, I just, out of curiosity, I want to see, how that's going to go.
Does Board of Health have some, Board of Health would have some purview over that, right? So,
That's a good point. Okay.
Sure.
Can we just put on just to reach out to make sure that is something that Board of Health, can you just reach out to them, make sure that they're looking at that? I think they may probably be the better place, and if not, we can readdress, but let's make sure that we have it in the notes and minutes, and get just some, even if it's a quick email, just make sure that that's something that they're gonna be looking at, or get their advice, or however they can. Do we have one last question, and then just because we have other things on our agenda to cover, we'll have a better control of time.
Are the wells currently certified as, by the DEP as public water sources, the 2 wells that they referenced?
No, they're private water sources. They're not public.
Okay, I just
They're
was on a
private
project.
wells, just like if you had a well at your house, it's a
Right.
private well, it's not a
Right.
public well.
But once you service more than 30 people per day, they have to be certified, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes, more than 25.
So if they test positive for MTBE, you put in some sort of mitigation system in order
You
to-
would, yes.
Okay, that's all.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, with that, can we continue
I'll make
this?
a motion to continue the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
I continue it to 2 weeks.
Hey, everybody's gonna stop. Can you guys give us 1 second for a don't go anywhere yet. So, how do we wanna handle this? We have, a lot to get through in a very short amount of time. We have, So we have November 7th, November 14th, and that's it before our time is up. Can we sort of down here? Guys, can we just stay a little bit? We need to
some
kind
time
of,
to sort of think here.
Yeah, we just need to clear heads for 1 second.
So I would recommend having another meeting.
So, at this point, we have, the only meetings we have scheduled.
For our October meeting, because we can't have one next week.
Halloween.
Well, no, that's not it, but we still need.
We need to advertise.
We need time to advertise.
Oh, yeah. Not on continuance.
No continuance. Okay, then.
We could do
We could do it
October
next week.
I can do the 24th, I cannot do Halloween.
Your kids can't live without you on Halloween.
No.
Stop being so greedy.
I'd like to make a motion, we add October 24th as a meeting.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Do we also want to add November 28th, and if we don't need it,
Yes.
then we don't need it, and I'm assuming we will.
Yep.
So,
I'll make a
Second.
motion to add.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
October 24th.
We're gonna add the 24th, and we're gonna add the 28th, October 24th and November 28th. So that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's it, 4 meetings.
And put them on every agenda.
You can't put
Yeah.
December 5th because
And-
that's the day after.
And take everybody else off, whatever, clear
On
out.
the on the 2 added meetings, we take everybody else off. The only people we have is GGG.
On all meetings, take everybody out. We can make a motion to continue everything till past.
We can't make everybody wait till December though. That's
Why?
all.
There's some things that we've been pushing off, or have been
Yeah.
pushed off for 8, 10 months now.
It's not fair to the smaller, in my opinion, it's not fair to a smaller project. Everybody has to jump to December. If we are adding 2 meetings, let's just clear those agendas or try to lighten up some of the ones we already have.
Yeah. So can you, October 24th will be traffic?
Yeah. So,
Okay, let's get a list of topics we want to discuss.
yeah, let's talk about that too.
Okay. I think traffic should be one, that's gonna be a big one.
And nobody's gonna wanna talk traffic until they've submitted to Mass DOT. That's just,
Well, we can look at traffic, and whether they submit or not, that's not our issue. Our issue is that we look at safety, we look at the traffic study, we go through, we answer questions, and, we've never had that as if DOT says no, then they have to figure out something on
Fair enough.
their own.
Okay, traffic is.
If we think that's necessary, so we need to look at we need to look
Traffic
at
study, right.
the traffic study, reviewed. I mean, I've read it, but we all need to read it again and
Yes,
kind of
agreed.
be,
right, more on top of
So-
We also need to get.
I just need to make a point about the traffic. I was anticipating a little bit more notice than a week to giving my consultant time. I don't know that they're available next Wednesday. I'll have to obviously ask them tomorrow.
Same here.
Okay.
sorry, we have a short, we
don't-
have to add the meeting. Is there?
Can I make a
About the-
suggestion? We have a Plan A and a Plan B for the 24th, so that we call Plan A traffic. If both people can confirm within 24 hours, we go forward with traffic. If we can't, then we have topics that are Plan B, and that way you don't lose a week.
that's fair.
What are you ready to move on for Plan B?
Yeah.
Do you want to bring Vanderweil in and deal with anything Vanderweil?
Is
So-
it
so-
Vanderweil
so
is
that-
your?
So go ahead, Dan
So
will
that
tell
would
you.
include, the energy system, the cogeneration, the cooling towers, utilities in general.
Would
That's
that
a
include
good one.
odor? We wouldn't have our odor
They-
peer review done by then.
Right, there's a specialist within Vanderweil that does odor, that might be something to put to a
That'd be
different
a
meeting.
future meeting.
Okay, it's odor by itself.
Okay.
So energy utilities, cogeneration,
Cool.
cooling. Can we add noise to that? Any possible?
Yes.
And you're talking about that for the 24th?
Contingency plan, if both traffic engineers are here to do traffic, and then we can add that. So, let's do a priority list of what everybody feels. Obviously, I think that environmental is gonna be huge, and I'm talking about, like, that's contingent, we need an engineer. I mean, even it comes down to air quality
Oh, yeah, we absolutely,
and,
yes.
and I honestly kind of feel that odor fits into that,
If that's gonna take some
Environmental.
time, do we think we can?
move that to the back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lighting, what do we think we need for lighting? We can.
I'm not much for lighting, no, because I think that they're addressing it, they're gonna have a plan, they're gonna submit a plan.
But I think, I mean, obviously, that's specifically mentioned.
They already have submitted a photo.
Okay,
So-
so.
But we
Mike,
didn't.
have you looked at that plan, or do you? Okay.
I mean, we should, just because again, we have homes that are so close to this,
Oh, that was one thing. I wanted to-
we wanna really pay attention to what they're gonna be seeing when they're,
Sure.
looking over, so it's something, we
Do
can
we have
look
the
at.
data sheets and the shades and pictures, or you do have those?
That came in today.
It's submitted?
Are there examples of what those look like? So let's say
The
that.
lights or the shades?
The shades, sorry.
I'm trying to track down some examples,
Thank
some
you.
real-life examples
Yeah.
that are not just manufactured.
Exactly. Because I think that'll help the audience too, to see what they're looking at.
So, we don't have to get definite dates for anything, but again, we need a punch list. So
Yes.
we can, so even if I work with Bill to get the
Exactly.
date scheduled, and then we'll reach out to make sure we don't wanna miss anything, so.
Exactly.
So, I have obviously environmental, we have traffic, we have the energy regeneration, the cooling, that whole bit. Trying to think of the specific site plan responsibilities, which are light engineering, traffic, anything environmental, community impact.
What would that fall under?
It's noted specifically community impact and, not so much defined, but it is part of our site plan review, that's
Well, wouldn't that kind of fall into traffic, because that's, well,
Yeah, I would agree.
Like all of this affects.
yeah, no, you're right, because that's
It
why
affects the
that's why I
community.
kind of
So
paused.
that's kind of, it's all together.
Yeah, all the community impact, when you think about it.
When
It's
big
every item.
moves, yeah, exactly.
Every item you
That's
hit.
kind of why we're dealing with it.
Traffic, that energy regeneration cooling, part of the,
What do you think
what do you guys feel?
should be grouped together if we're gonna do more than one topic in an evening? If you feel we can get through more than one topic in an evening?
So, I mean, I think traffic in one, I think all things Vanderweil in one. I almost then feel like everything else in either one or two. Because there's not a whole lot left in everything else.
Well, there's
And I
gonna be,
think-
there's gonna be some issues that are gonna need to be readdressed.
Well,
and-
so then maybe the fourth meeting is
Yes.
regroup on 1, 2, and 3. I think on your meeting 3, it's environmental, it's odor. You can talk with Mike on whether you need somebody in addition to look at lighting.
Yeah, lighting
But-
is another consultant.
But,
Yes.
but if you did those 3, those are gonna be things that you're gonna need the most lead time on, because you don't have the professionals lined up. So to me, that would be meeting C, and then meeting D would be catch-all at the end,
Exactly.
So,
I think. So, A is traffic,
Okay.
B is energy,
Mechanical.
cogeneration, noise, cooling, and utilities. C is odor, environmental, and lighting. And then D is regroup on any open issues.
With A and B potentially flip-flop.
With A
Yes.
and,
Yeah.
Yes,
or A, B, and C
exactly.
flip-flop,
Yes.
depending on when, right.
Yeah.
And I know we had October 24th, I know we had November 28th. I don't know what the other meetings were in there. I presume one earlier in
oh,
November.
okay, so those ones that were already scheduled, that's why you heard those dates. So it would be October 24.
Yeah.
Which is next
It'll
week.
be November 7th, November 14th,
Okay.
and November 28th, which
Yeah.
hopefully,
And then we're done.
Okay.
Then we're great.
and in the meantime, renditions, we wanna know what it's gonna look like. We want as many, we're not engineers, we like to see the pretty pictures. The board likes, we want, when any of the abutters come in, we like them to know what they're gonna look at when they're standing in their front yards. 'Cause they're all kind of facing, so if you could make that happen so we can show them and we can figure that out. Obviously of the power plant, the power, we wanna see what that's gonna look like. The decommissioning bond, wanna work on that, that might take, the engineers a little bit of time to kind of figure out that. I'm not sure if there's much of a standard to figure that out, but in case something happens, to take it all down and make it back to, the way that it was. Is there anything else that I'm missing that we wanna make sure that?
Is that the MIPA information?
Oh, yeah, and we wanna know what's going on with MIPA, so,
Probably meeting C.
and again, we're saying this up front because if you guys are working on it up front, we're not gonna be waiting at, there's nothing like conditions at the end when we don't know, when we say, there's a condition of this, but it's much better to kind of have all the information up front. So, when we get to the end,
We had also talked about the soil management plan. Do we want to see something
yes.
Yes.
in more detail than what's been provided so far?
Soil management plan, seems like,
With environmental perhaps.
So just as a point on that, yeah, so we can do that on the environmental. If we can lock in that date, as Mr. Lilly mentioned, he's gonna be traveling for the better part of the next month. But if we give him appropriate notice, there's a chance that he could fly in for 48 hours and attend one more meeting if we really need him to.
Since we're trying to be as flexible as possible and for everybody, do you want to consult with him tonight and get back to us tomorrow as to a date that might work best for him?
No, but respectfully, I want to know that you guys have your environmental consultant lined up.
Fair enough.
And as
Third
soon as-
meeting will be November 14th.
November, so most likely November 14th, and then if Bill can let us know that you have somebody engaged, and then maybe the easy thing to do is put them in touch with Frank.
Yes.
He can give them whatever information they need, and then that way he can be, and they can make sure they both can be here the same night.
There is a backup plan if the Tennessee pipeline doesn't work. Is that on the drawings, or is there a backup plan?
We can ask Vanderwaal to speak to that next week.
That's just coming in next week.
We don't know. We don't know if it's next week with traffic, so.
Yeah,
Potential offer.
it'll be next week or November 7th.
We're gonna, yeah, we need to push that.
We don't have
Number
anything.
one priority tomorrow.
So Mike, you're gonna call our traffic?
Yes.
Okay.
I will let Bill know as soon as I know.
Okay.
She's available.
Okay.
So we've already continued this.
Yep.
It's already continued, so we got our dates.
We're good?
Thank you.
very much.
Okay, and actually on the 24th, it'll be all you.
It'll be all you.
October
You're the only one on
24th
the
is all
agenda.
you.
You're the only ones on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
She's getting that.
Got
I'm
it,
sorry.
got it, thank you.
Okay. And the same,
And the same will go on the 28th.
November 28th, it will be your
Yes.
show.
Do we want to see if we can have Ed's comments, responses to Ed's
Yes.
comments? Will you guys be able to have responses to Ed's comments for October 24th next week?
We'll
I'll
do
get
our
that.
best, we need to see them, and then
Yeah.
the
Right, we
question
gotta-
of
we have-
what
yes, we get 'em.
topic we're actually handling. I don't know if that will,
Right.
all of those fit into that topic. I guess we'll just,
Wait to
if
see
you can
what
get
they
them
are.
to me and us, the team, and we'll
Okay.
try to figure that out, and maybe there's some each time,
Sure.
Yeah,
depending on.
whichever
And maybe
one
we can
that
post
falls
them
in.
too.
Subject
Yep.
appropriate. If there's some we can respond to in letter like we've done already, I think we'd be happy to do that, if that's
Perfect.
okay with the board.
Yeah.
Through Bill, of course. Are we all set?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Tell Bill, have Bill to speak on it. I really need an attorney to help us with the conditions. We really need an attorney to help us with the conditions. We really need an attorney.
Thank you very much.
Right? We need- And honestly, I don't even care if it's, I don't even care if it's
Or even Cedar Channel, I know the bad
I
ones.
just want somebody who focuses, who specializes in land stuff.
No, I hear
Can
you.
I ask you a quick question before you open this up? Is there any point in me staying other than, are we discussing anything other than there's an A&R, but there's
Oh,
nothing
if you
else?
think you're getting out of here early.
Because there's nothing else I can vote on.
You're right.
I'm recusing myself for the rest of the meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're discussing something, I'll be happy to stick around, but I'll be happy to stick around. but
We've had a
if
discussion.
we're not-
All right, let me,
Let's just look through the.
let's just make sure there's no discussion. I have so much stuff there.
Yes.
All right, so we voted to add a meeting to review the future agenda, so we're gonna
Yeah, we've been doing that.
We did the,
get that. Okay, so there's been, Robin reached out, and, well, a long time ago, she appointed Bill
Yes,
to
I
be on the
remember
solar committee, and we just said we didn't have time.
yes.
Because I'm so giving and so nice, I was thinking that we could possibly ask Bill to be part of that. It's only a couple hours a month.
That's fair.
And I honestly, our board should
Well, there
be,
should be some input
we
there.
should be seriously part of that,
Yes,
because
agreed.
we handle zoning, and it
Yes.
just makes sense for him to be part. So Bill, if you would be willing to attend the solar
Sure, I
moratorium
already-
meetings and
yeah,
do
agreed to do
it,
that, so that's fine.
and it's only a couple hours a month, and
Yeah.
it's something that, Robin and I discussed, and so, and we should be fine salary-wise. So I don't think we have to vote on it. I mean, I think,
I can't imagine we
that-
would.
that's fine.
Right.
But I just wanted, I just didn't want to say okay without telling you
Exactly.
guys. And so discuss about, so we've been talking about the legal representation at the BGG meetings.
I think that's so
So I'm more concerned that we're not, I don't, this is new and huge, and honestly, it's the biggest thing Charlton will ever get, that we ever had and that we will ever get. And we
Oh, I
can't-
couldn't agree more. I think that every other party represented has a very high-priced professional lawyers. I see no reason why we shouldn't do the same.
It's right up there with the power plant.
Exactly.
So I know there's been a little bit of, I got the email saying that the chair was uncomfortable having KP law. I'm not uncomfortable. I just feel that they're negotiating the host agreement. That's their world. That's what's going on. And I think having a clean set of eyes, having a land/environmental legal specialist.
Yes.
Who deals with all these, who knows how to deal with litigation, or prevent us from future litigation or whatever.
Exactly.
To have the board to protect our decisions makes sense. So I did make 2 calls and I haven't heard back yet. I've asked Bill to kind of reach out. We have some names. As we just need, the problem is this isn't an easy thing. There's a lot to catch up on and a lot, but to make sure that, for example, because there will be conditions, and we want to make sure that all the conditions
Yes.
are just,
They're reasonable, they're standard. And we also want a second set of eyes on all these plans that we're getting, because what if we're missing something?
And
that's
that's
my only
exactly
fear,
how I-
is that we are good in our fields, but we're not land experts. We're not marijuana cultivation experts. We're not, this is the biggest thing to hit the United States, not even Charlton, the United States.
and it's our board without a
Exactly.
planner, without,
Agreed.
luckily we have Bill, but we don't have like a full-time planner that really
A professional set of eyes doesn't hurt, because although I don't think that they're trying to get away with anything, I truly don't, they have a professional lawyer on staff.
Are you kidding? I mean,
Do we need a
of course, they
civil
wanna get
engineer?
away, they want anything, they want everything to be as cheap, as simple,
easy.
and easy
Correct.
as possible, and obviously, our job is to protect the town and make sure that we
Exactly.
do everything right.
Correct.
So, I know I've been talking about, this, I've reached out to all the boards, I've had Jane reach
Oh,
out,
wonderful.
so we can all sit in the same room.
Good.
And talk about everybody's role.
Yep.
And to make sure none of us miss anything.
Perfect.
So,
Would it be good to, I mean, Kurt's not in this meeting. Do we,
no,
About
I
Todd
mean,
was my next question.
yeah, so Todd will be there, everybody will be,
Everybody who has a vote,
everybody
basically.
who has a role in this will be there, including assessors, I mean, everybody. We have, so, one other one of us can attend, and I'm assuming, Jean, since you're home during the day, so,
Yeah,
we
I can
originally,
do during the
we
day.
originally thought next Wednesday, but I have a conflict in the morning. So maybe Monday or Tuesday, 'cause maybe Monday's a little early, Tuesday, more, like Tuesday, anytime. I can take the day off if I need to, whatever, Bill.
I know I'm doing voter voting.
On Tuesday?
I'm not sure which day.
Let me know when
We'll
we're,
coordinate.
and the
And if-
time.
We just can't have 3 of us
Correct.
there.
Because then we have to post.
And we'll make sure, and Jane will be there, and I'll actually ask for, you'll probably like minutes. We won't really take official minutes, but just so there's a summary of what we
Exactly.
discussed.
So,
So you guys can
Perfect.
kind of get a feel, and if you have,
Any questions?
specific questions for other boards, like obviously we want to know about the assessment with, whether it's agricultural and how it's kind of open, if there's any news. We
Agreed.
should all be on the same page.
Water, sewer, everything else,
Yeah,
conservation.
so everybody, everybody's in, most people have already confirmed, so we just gotta kind of pin down an exact time and,
Sure.
I just,
think that's a
again,
brilliant
just wanted
idea.
to let you guys know that that was in process. We kind of started it last week, so I just wanna.
Awesome.
All right, sorry, I just wanted to get those before you left.
I'm gonna go sit in the audience.
Is there anything else there?
Yeah. Oh, do you have to sign the Mylar?
She doesn't need to, we've got.
We got enough guys.
We gotta get that.
All right.
Jeez.
Since the audience first,
We have the,
We should do that.
we have the two Gunter reduced frontage lots.
Yes, you do. Allow myself to formally recuse myself. Good day. I want to see first.
Sign that sheet for. Over there, get it. Covered.
Yeah, this is quite a large site.
Which one we want first? Which road?
If the board doesn't mind, could we actually just handle it all as one?
No, I think it's two separate.
Okay, sure.
This one is.
Bid here for the road?
Yeah, put that in.
Okay, good evening. For the record, my name is Zach Couture with HSNT Group. I'm here
I
tonight.
apologize that it's so late.
Oh, please, it's okay. I get paid overtime, so. But again, for the record, my name is Zach Couture with HSNT. I'm representing Gunter LLC. We're here tonight for a special permit for reduced frontage lots on Bolsher Road. That's the first thing you'll hear, and then in our next meeting, we'll discuss a reduced frontage lot on Horn Homestead. So as I'm sure you're all aware, this is a direct result of the recension of the subdivision. So this is a new layout of it, pretty much exactly what we want to do with the surrounding area. Again, we are going for the reduced frontage lots. That will allow us to basically create a much larger lots. That will be a lot less impact on the neighborhood, a lot more green space, and a lot more preservation of the wetlands themselves. These will all be single-family homes, so there'll be no more construction of like the large subdivision roads and things like that. So we will utilize just Bolsher Road, and then for the we'll talk about that next. The plans that you see in front of you right here, these are a result of some conditions that was set forth by this board, as well as some negotiations between the Mid-State Trail as well as Greater Worcester Land Trust. In red right here, this is the beginning of the new trail location, which will be accessed by a smaller 100 by 100 roughly lot. It won't be a buildable lot, but it will be parking basically, so they can meet. They'll walk down Bolsher Road, and then they can access the trail, which will continue off over onto the next land. I guess the only thing I would bring up, and I know Horn Homestead is its own separate thing, but there has been a minor adjustment based on meeting with Colin Novick and Greater Worcester Land Trust. So this area down here, which is part of the Horn Homestead Road special permit, this will now be deeded off and granted to Greater Worcester Land Trust. But there was a concern with access. So what we are proposing is a 20-foot wide access path that will come and intersect with the Mid-State Trail. This area will increase to it'll increase to 30 feet and then meander around, which is lot 13, and then access onto their land here. So they will have a little overlap. It'll be the Mid-State Trail and their access point. So they are kind of now one, and I know we submitted that separately, but unfortunately, negotiations kind of went to the last minute. So this is the agreed upon plan between all parties. So with that, I'll open up to questions on this, and then we can jump over to the other one.
If I could so just elaborate a bit, the letter that you just got is from Mr. Gunter, and it sort of consolidates a lot of the requirements that we imposed on the approval of his amendment of his previous definitive plan. And he has been able to secure from Mr. Walker, who was going to be the purchaser of these lots. He had a reduced frontage lot with 75 feet of frontage, and only 50 feet is required. So Mr. Walker agreed to provide 20 feet of that, I think it was 73-foot frontage. So it would still comply with the 50-foot minimum frontage requirement, and deed that land to the Greater Worcester Land Trust for vehicular access to that back 60 acres. As you may recall, Colin Novick felt it was very important to have a physical access for vehicles to get into that backland in the event of storm. So Mr. Gunter has responded to that and has satisfied Mr. Novick's request. We also had a discussion about that area in red at the base of Butcher Road and Old Worcester Road to provide a parking area for the Mid-State Trail. And so Mr. Gunter has agreed to create this 100 by 100 foot parcel of land to deed to the land trust for parking. Unfortunately, that lot along Butcher Road is wet, so it's not possible to create the trail off-road, so that short distance between the parking lot and this access, the trail will follow Butcher Road along the road there. Is the only feasible way to provide trail access. So I think, we've got a pretty solid plan here in terms of doing the best we can and compromising on all sides to get a workable result of open space and trails. And Mr. Gunter, of course, is getting, I think it's 7 reduced frontage lots plus 4 or 5 conventional lots on this plan. They will all conform to zoning. So if you approve this special permit for the reduced frontage lot plan, he would then have buildable lots to replace his previously approved subdivision.
Now, what lot's getting created right now?
So basically, everything you see in green, besides the darker green,
Yeah.
which that's going to the land trust.
Okay.
So everything you see in green,
Yep.
that's what's basically, not new land obviously, but new lot lines based off of either meeting the
Okay, gotcha.
zoning requirements or the reduced frontage subdivision.
All right, so this is the table of dimensional standards to show which lots are reduced frontage.
Oh, yeah, all right.
And which are conventional.
And I would just like to point out, in terms of that table, Lot 13 has changed just a little bit, just to allow that 20-foot access way to be cut out. So the square footage has gone down a little bit.
And Colin's pretty, he
Colin-
pretty much got everything he wanted.
Yes, he has agreed to this.
All right, so don't worry about what is in bold here with the, no, if you're not here at the tonight's meeting, it's null and void to accept it.
Yeah, Colin was traveling last week.
Yep.
So he was
Okay,
not available
all
to meet
right.
that deadline, but he
Okay.
has since responded and
Okay,
that's
all
been worked
all
out.
right.
So he responded, and it's, so we have email, everything's like documented, that
Yes.
responses in and everything.
Did ever have any response on this reduced frontage lot?
I
Or any comment?
think so. I don't think we got a comment from him on the.
He has seen it.
Yes.
Can I take a look?
Absolutely. Go for it. I tried to color it to give you the visual, but it is quite a big area.
No, reduced frontage plan, usually it's plus a house. Just fits that question.
I think some do, some.
Okay. Some do, some don't.
I know he did look at it.
Okay.
We don't have any
No
written comments
comment?
from him.
Okay, all right. But meets all the standards, far
It does,
as the
right.
strip and widening now.
Yeah.
Do you have that sheet of what?
Yes. I believe, is there a column in there for the access strip?
Just lots. Oh, yeah, for an
Okay,
access.
so-
Oh, what it goes through.
So 600 feet is the main trail. So you can see it's like a 400. Right there. They all comply with the access strip limit.
There's no,
It's already existing.
Greater Worcester Land Trust would have the ability to put a 12-foot wide gravel compacted driveway within the 20-foot access if they chose to. Which it would be only used in like an emergency situation, storm situations, things like that. It wouldn't be a permanent drive-through basically. So not what we're intending it to be used as.
Like the Colin said, if there's a tornado and there's a whole bunch of downed trees or something and they have to go and pull, you know. something
Right,
like that.
right. Just provide some kind of access.
Do we have any concerns, issues?
Any from the public?
I mean, we were just waiting for them guys to get their stuff together and agree,
Yeah, I think
you know, agree to, everybody kind of compromised and.
we had a lot of stipulations, and I think they agreed to everything
Yeah,
now, so we've
I
seen
think
this plan.
actually everybody worked pretty hard to make it happen, so. So do I have a motion?
Open, open, public hearing.
I'm sorry, oh, I'm sorry. Do we have questions? I'm sorry.
Can we just see that?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet.
I'd like to see it too. And I have a question.
Feel free.
Have you actually rescinded the original deal yet?
Yes.
Yes, because they
The
met the
last
criteria.
meeting, you had put it on hold.
No, there was a vote taken too.
There was a vote.
Yes.
Yep, as long as that criteria was
The
met.
conditions
There was,
were
there was,
met.
there was stipulations.
As far as the tree
And these are like,
plantings,
these are.
and then,
Removing the stumps.
removing the stumps, and then the Greater Land, Worcester Land Trust, and access strip.
I guess if I could just ask you a procedural question, because I think now with providing that access, it makes much more sense to combine these, like, in terms of a one plan set, it makes a lot more sense to combine them all. But I'm just concerned whether, you know, how that would affect, you know, voting and things like that. Because they were advertised as two separate.
Right, so we haven't taken up the one Homestead Road site.
Right, right.
But
But
we will need an A&R plan, I think, right, for you to create these lots once.
yeah,
the road's
yeah,
taken.
okay, that makes it up. Okay. Because I do have some revised plans, but they don't really make sense because they're all, it's showing like everything, where they need to separate. But with the A&R plan, could we do just one for everything, or should we stick with one Homestead, one with Wilshire Roads? Or could it be kind of done as a whole, addressing both decisions if one?
I don't really have a preference. It's a large
I
tract.
think maybe one would be fine, right?
It should be,
one's
yeah.
fine.
I think it'd make more sense, honestly, especially with now that we're accessing when there's an emergency access point, maybe, you know,
Okay.
just so you're not searching through different plan sets, you know, it's kind
You
of all there.
didn't, you didn't get like a big driveway through your house or anything like that?
That's
You
exactly what I was
figured-
making sure. One never knows. That would be great.
So we don't have any public comments.
So is that parking gonna be gravel lot, or is it just gonna be fielded, or is this, what's the plan for that parking and this thing fielded?
Frank, maybe you can answer that question?
Yeah, I think they just pack gravel.
Okay, but they're gonna do something, they're not just gonna leave it. What is it now, is it wooded, or is it a, is it?
Yeah, I think it's just.
That's the land, like, that's the land trust, they'll do, that's what
Yeah,
they'll.
the typical trailhead, just
Okay.
pack and gravel.
Yeah.
So they'll
have
do
to
that.
go, they'll have to be permitted through Conservation Commission.
That's what I-
Because of proximity to the wetlands.
Right.
So, you know, one of the things that, that Bill had asked me about is possibly going from the parking lot, heading east and putting the trail on the eastern boundary of that 100-square-foot parcel, but that's all wetlands.
Yeah.
You know, and it's something that the Greater Worcester Land Trust can talk about with the Conservation Commission if they would want to try to put a trail through it, but ideally, you'd stay out of the wetlands,
Yeah.
the parking area can all be in the upland and just be compacted gravel.
That short section of the road is okay, there's a lot of the Mid-State Trail that does follow.
Yeah,
does follow
exactly.
country roads,
So,
so that's- I don't think that's.
You'd like to keep the trail in the woods as much as you can and not on the road, but, it's a pretty short section, so.
Right.
And imagine they would want a sign as well, some kind of trailhead sign in the parking area.
No, it ended up being a good compromise. It's a
Yeah,
good
so I
setup.
think it worked out pretty well. And, you can't, no one should have to worry about building anything because it's technically not a buildable lot, so I don't think we need a building permit to do the compacted gravel. Now, if we start putting up structures and you need a building permit, it's not a buildable lot, then the Greater Worcester Land Trust would have to go through variances and all sorts of rigmarole that they probably wouldn't get because they kind of created their own hardship by accepting, a non-buildable lot, so.
And I think too, on the A&Rs, we would clearly state this is a non-buildable lot, so it kind of prevent that from ever, future use from ever happening. It's definitely intended just for
Is there a
parking.
question?
So the light green, they're all reduced frontage lots?
The majority of them are, these three, on this side of Bosher Road, those are more conventional lots that would meet zoning. But these much larger lots with smaller access on the road, those are the reduced frontage. So basically this section.
So there are 7 reduced and 4 conventional, is that correct?
I just want to clarify that before I say that. So there's, yes, yep, that's right, yep, that's exactly right. 4 conventional, 7 special permit.
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do we have a motion to approve?
I guess if everybody's happy.
Yeah, they meet all the criteria.
And do we have any standard conditions? So
Sure.
Yep.
And none of these lots could be further subdivided, that's.
That's part of the condition. Correct, that's one of the stipulations in the bylaw.
This is the ones that are all aware.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the reduced frontage lot.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Now you play them too. So now we have one homestead.
Horn Homestead, basically the same, with now the added access to Bosher Road, the emergency access. And now from our negotiations with Greater Worcester Land Trust, a majority of the site is now gonna be deeded off as conservation area, which obviously will prevent any kind of future development.
Do you have an exact number of acres?
Yes, I do. It's 52.4 acres.
So, homestead is here?
Correct. Right.
And this is the solar?
Yep.
This is the
Yep,
current solar lot?
that's exactly correct. Yep. And then this would allow them to have basically legal frontage, if you will, to access
So
it.
this is the only reduced frontage lot that you're looking at?
Yes, this would access off of Horn Homestead as well.
Yeah, that was actually part of the first plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because when we originally submitted it, picture this as kind of the boundary. Like that was submitted as a separate plan. But now, it looks more confusing now that this is a part of it, but yeah, this was a part of this here.
So what are we discussing now? Just this piece of property or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be this
Okay.
right here.
There's no buildable lots there.
No, well, it's just the solar lot that's being utilized as a solar lot, right?
Just solar.
It's just
Right.
a solar.
So half of it is solar and half of it, that's the
Conservation.
already, and the other is the land trust, right? So
Oh, that's it? Oh. So on the existing solar field, the one on Homestead?
Yeah, that's
Okay, that's what
that's
that
the
is.
top
Gotcha.
lighter green portion, that's what that's
Gotcha.
currently being used for.
Yep.
Essentially, this plan, which I said to the gentleman earlier, this is to make them establish some legal frontage off of Homestead Road for that solar facility. So this would allow them to utilize this as their frontage through the reduced frontage special permit.
I wasn't here, was the solar field done?
Maybe Frank,
Yes, it's there.
the solar field, is it up and established?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I wasn't a part of that,
Oh,
that
okay.
process.
I believe so, but that was actually handled with Borrego, and so I don't know if they've actually
Okay.
flipped the switch and they're actually generating. I
Okay.
think,
But it's-
all the construction is done, but sometimes that last interconnect
Takes a while.
can take a while. Just sometimes there's downstream upgrades and whatnot, so.
All this kind of does is just break off.
Yeah, I
give
don't
the
know that
land
it's
trust their
actively
peace,
flowing.
Right.
So
Yep.
the whole
I'm not sure.
purpose of this is just to break off that piece and give the land trust the land that they were
Good.
promised and
Yep.
so.
And everybody's happy.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Okay.
All right.
So Bill, everything looks good to you?
Yes, it does.
Make a motion, we accept this?
Close
Oh,
the
you're
hearing.
right.
Any comments from anybody? No? This one?
Only endorse this.
Okay, we have motion to close the hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And do we have a motion to?
Make a motion, we accept this homestead
Second.
reduced frontage lot.
With the standard conditions.
Standard
Um,
conditions.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Thanks for waiting.
Thank you.
Now we know the strategy. We just wait for you to wear down.
Shoot 'em.
We only had a good 2 months of hammering out issues, so.
It was a good compromise.
No, I think
No,
overall it
it's
worked
just
out really
preference
well.
for everybody, what source it is.
Everyone's kind of,
They were already
I
sent
understand
here,
the
so-
butters and,
I've-
If you want, it's.
Did you review
feel
it?
aggrieved to make sure it's cut down in my front yard. too, so.
I'll
Yep,
know you
yep.
have
So I think
Yep, these
we're
two.
not gonna be making.
What happens when you negotiate in good faith and stuff.
So.
We have just, we have an A&R, right?
So you do already have some markers, I mean, granted, it's not everywhere, like anywhere you see RRS or RDHS, or those are survey markers,
again,
so that
it
establishes
protects the
like your property
Like what we
Say
did
they
with
should
the-
be easy to find.
boundary. No, they're definitely not.
Because whatever they flagged when they surveyed it, but that was years ago, so all those flags are gone, so it's kind of, you got a metal detector walking
But
around
it's
the hill,
IG.
hit something.
It's gonna be fun.
There you go, so yeah, case off.
There you go. Here's the
Something,
stuff.
case it off and then start plugging the metal detector.
You can do, yeah, yeah.
This is the 144 Sturbridge Road. This is the proposed site of the 44 marijuana growth facility. This is
Yeah, such
the
a long
plan
one.
of existing
Right.
2 pins, topography, you're not
showing
gonna,
existing
you might want a few
Right.
stakes along it just to be able to see.
dimensions and angles. There was no division.
Luckily for us, we obviously have the control. out
Preliminary
there
plan,
because
81P
we
plan.
did the original survey.
81X plan, excuse me.
I'd have to check my surveys,
Existing
anytime you
lot
talk in
layout.
large areas lined up with wetlands. big
There's
projects,
obviously conforming lot to zoning.
I mean, I can definitely get you over a quote if you want, just to, have you
Where are they
understand.
trying to?
Yeah,
Yeah, how many
yeah.
lots is this?
There's no lots, no new lots,
Oh.
just the existing lot.
Okay.
What was the,
And
just
I- and I
to make
can-
it
I
clear,
can-
what's the purpose of the 81
Yes.
It's really to confirm the existing dimensions of the lot, so they've gone out and verified all the needs, et cetera, et cetera.
Can you get a recorded plan and get his lots?
This
I guess it's a matter of
also was
just getting,
submitted
generating the
under
Mylar and getting Mylars.
A&R plan, it gains 3 years of protection from zoning changes. But you're submitting it here tonight, which is after the zoning change, after the zoning bylaw. But it is kind of a moot point because that bylaw did continue to allow by special permit marijuana cultivation in the IG district. So it's not really necessary. This would have provided 2 years of protection from changes in use. So if there had been an amendment at town meeting, for example, to change that SP to an N, theoretically, this would have given that protection, but it came in too late to do so. That was the main reason for the plan.
So we're just approving what they're submitting?
Yep. Yes.
What is, what, do they have, like a purpose on this plan?
Sure. The purpose of this plan is to show property as recorded in the Registry of Deeds book page. And also, please note that this plan shows no new property lines. This plan is a compiled plan of property based on available maps, deeds, of record, and physical evidence, but are subject to all easements, right-of-ways, agreement, and rights and encumbrances of record that an accurate and thorough title search may disclose. Boundaries shown are the results of an actual field survey based on available maps, deeds of record, and physical evidence.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the A&R plan.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Mike?
Just gonna have to use someone else's extension on.
Get the sign first.
We have an extension to read, who's up for an extension?
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and endorse that plan first, and then we'll move on.
Can you use your pen?
Absolutely.
Jane, do you have that extension there? Or do I?
No, this doesn't do anything that they can start doing anything.
No, maybe.
You have to sign one.
Okay.
We need to sign one paper too?
Yes.
And they can't start doing anything in this building.
Well, it's interesting because of that bylaw that was passed
Yeah,
that requires town meeting to approve any host community agreement.
yeah,
And they can't file with the planning board until they have a signed host community agreement.
correct.
So
That's why I
if
wanna
that
make sure
bylaw-
we're not giving them permission to do anything without that agreement.
Right.
Okay.
So it really depends on what the Attorney General does.
And they have 60 days, 90 days to
I think
decide
it's
on it?
90
90
days.
days to decide on it.
Right, so if the Attorney General upholds that bylaw, then
And
they
they
have
need to wait till
to
May.
go, they could have another special town meeting.
Special, month. That's what we need, 6, 7 town meetings
Get
in
that
a
email
year.
from the, that guy. I can
So
use
that's
that.
possible.
I'm gonna sign the paper.
Remind me to send you that, somewhere I have that email. Okay.
All right.
I thought I had sent it, but obviously didn't. 500 and more people.
Yes, we'll take it.
So we have the extension, why don't you do the extension first?
So we do have a request from Mr. Benjamin to extend his solar site plan at the Charlton Orchards for 1 year.
I thought that went away.
It came, well, this came in this week,
How
10/16.
can we extend
can't.
an open plan when this is going? This is
You've got-
insane to us.
Well, I think the intention is that if the VGG plan is not approved, he would still have an approved solar plan. So
I'm not
that's his
comfortable doing
intention.
It makes me really uncomfortable having multiple things open
Yeah,
on,
no,
open on.
I thought that was supposed to get, before we even got involved with the VGG, I thought that got,
And then the attorney says, oh, I don't see any reason why there shouldn't be two open
We
plans.
never got a
on one."
formal request to rescind.
I'm not comfortable extending it.
This actually came in past the deadline. So the deadline was
The
10/7, and this came in 10/16.
Oh, so it
So
expired.
you could not grant this request because it came in late.
So that would automatically remove the current site plan?
Yes.
So there would be no site plan?
Correct.
So it wouldn't be, yeah.
Right.
And that would allow us now to be more in line with what we believe, to only have one open plan per
Right.
piece of land. So it'll actually force the VGG plan to now be more in compliance with kind of our
Right.
rules.
I thought this was revoked.
No, we didn't do it because,
No.
remember, the attorney said that we could have, but I've had other attorneys say that you shouldn't have, so it was just a matter of two different attorneys kind of different opinions, so.
Okay.
I'm
I'm making a motion not to extend it due to the lack of time, or whatever you wanna call it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Takes
And
me
when you,
not being comfortable.
I guess you're gonna reach out to, Mr. Benjamin and you'll explain that,
It's
that
a
it's past,
Tuesday.
it's past the deadline, however, it also kind of puts us in a better, and use your good words, but in a better place with the VGG
Mhm.
plan, because
Okay.
we were uncomfortable having two open site plans at the same time.
So theoretically, you could resubmit that solar plan, since it's
Mhm.
already been vetted, probably be a fairly quick review, but it would still require a new application.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
Yeah.
Joe, can you-
we got our punch list.
Yeah.
We have to just sign.
Yep, you did that.
Jennings Road Extension, partial release of covenant.
So, in the Jennings Road Extension subdivision, at one point in time, this board approved the modification of that plan. And as a result of that plan, the lot numbering changed for a couple of lots. It went from like 7 to 7R, 8 to 8R, 9, 10R, et cetera. The covenant that provided for the release of those lots was based on the original numbering system. Now the title company is saying that these lots, 7R, 8R, 9R, and 10R, were not the ones that were released. So they're asking for an approval from the board to connect the original lot releases to the new lots. The new R lots are essentially the same lots that the board released from covenant before. I can show you that plan if you'd like to see that, but they all conform to zoning, all have the original frontages. In that plan that you modified, there was actually a reduction. One lot was lost to make the shapes a little bit more usable by potential home buyers. So, in having looked at that, I see no reason why you would not agree to this modification of the covenant, because they are essentially conforming lots, and they are essentially the same lots that you had approved before.
Which is a technicality of the name civil lot.
Yes.
The numbers, name, number lot.
So their attorney prepared a partial release of covenant document, which I have looked at, and it seems very straightforward. We have the owner's signatures and notary by Jane today. And we need the planning board signatures on this as well.
Do we have to vote to?
on that?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion, we accept the release of the covenant.
Okay.
Can you just sign? And second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Jane, did you sign your notary on that form, or are you waiting?
I was waiting for them.
Okay, fine.
And they're gonna pick it up and I'll make a copy.
Okay.
Put it in the folder when you.
Legally, we only need 3, that's majority of the board. We'll have 4
Oh.
since we're 4 person. Right.
We need to approach. Okay, that's it.
So, one more thing, we we need to schedule a public hearing for a marijuana ban. The selectmen did send in a memo, email over asking us to write up the marijuana ban. We have to hold a public hearing. I think it's because they voted to do so. I think it's kind of counterproductive because we have a new, like a pretty clean zoning bylaw, but if they want us to hold a hearing just so they can get it on, at the May town meeting, I mean, we can again, it seems silly, but if that's what they want, if they're asking us to do that, you might as well give the residents a chance to vote.
That's fine, we don't need to do that before we
Get
do
the
BGG.
Right.
Then I say let's
January or
schedule that
something.
for.
So-
January or February?
Well, no, you have 65 days to hold the hearing from the date you receive it from the selectmen.
Okay,
Oh.
So you have to do
So-
that in October or November.
okay.
or
When
early
did
summer.
we received it?
September 27th, I think.
September.
It's the day after the planning board meeting is.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
27th, they asked us.
Or was it October? No, it was September
Can
27th.
Can they vote and ask us again, no, can they vote and just ask us again until we can get that, or is that real, what happens if we don't?
I don't know. It's your responsibility to hold the hearing within 65 days, so.
So,
What does that take us out to, Bill?
So, public hearing is good for 6 months. So say you had the hearing December 1, you would add 6 months to that.
Yeah.
If the town meeting doesn't meet before that 6-month period, public hearing needs to be held again.
So the next schedule, the annual town meeting is what, May 15th, middle of May usually?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that timing wouldn't work?
So we're gonna have to do 2 of them?
That's the question, unless we had a special town meeting for that.
Right, so I could ask the selectmen if they would withdraw that
Can they just,
article.
can they just withdraw and then
And then
And
send it
resubmit
in
it?
another month
Sure.
or so?
Yeah,
just so we
that
can
would,
get it
I
in
mean, because
January?
right now, we can't make that town meeting. Just
Right.
ask them if they could withdraw it and
Okay,
resubmit it in January,
okay.
end of January.
Yeah, they gave us some work to do, so we're pretty busy dealing with their stuff, so. Just so everybody knows, we have some, future proposed site plans that will come in, but I mean, we really can't really see do very much of this. We're gonna be real up. Do we have an agenda for the other, so we have the micro molding, MTD micro molding amendment, they're expanding their building, at Charlie Crossing, the score site plan, a solar site, definitive subdivision plan for solar on Carpenter Hill. And with a proposing for a zone change on Stafford Street.
7-month approval on preliminary drawing expires.
Yep.
We're gonna have to open the hearing on that one, right?
Well, no, so on the zoning map change, one of the owners of this area, founded by the Mass Pike, Stafford Street and Center Depot Road, is
Oh, wait,
thinking.
that's this one here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Pump up one.
Okay.
Jump up, I'm,
The subdivision one for the
Oh,
solar
okay.
build.
One that
that
expires.
11/20, the preliminary
Right.
one.
Yes, Frank is working on that, he intends to submit that next week to me, I think, so that would be submitted to your board at the next meeting.
So that'll meet the deadline?
And then you would, yes, as long as it's submitted within 7 months of the
Okay.
preliminary plan.
that's solar again now, see, is this,
That's already grandfathered in. That was
They
already-
did a preliminary, this is
They, right,
definitive.
you
Oh, this is
approved the
definitive.
solar
Yeah.
site plan,
okay.
but in order for them to do that, because of the moratorium, they need to do the definitive plan. And that will be like we've already approved, where they get waivers for much of the
roadways.
the road. And in fact, BGG will also be submitting another one of those for their property, for the orchards, in order to maintain their protection. from the-
Another one? Another subdivision plan? Oh, wait,
For
the
the
definitive,
old-
sorry,
right, for
sorry,
the-
sorry.
For the 44 Worcester Road site, you denied their preliminary plan, but that didn't affect their ability to submit a definitive plan. So they will be doing that as well.
Okay, great, thanks.
So that zone change that's, you said City Depot or Center Depot? Oh, okay.
Center Depot.
Center Depot and Stafford Street.
This says the future.
So, so the owner of a couple of the lots in here, Mr. Bellerive, said he wanted to be able to use some of the homes in there for offices. And he's asking to, how would he go about rezoning that property from agricultural to community business? and I said I would bring it to the board. He has two options. One,
Is
the
it-
planning board could sponsor that,
Is there any other CB in that area, or is
or
that?
he could do citizens
It's not
petition.
flood zoning, right? Is it connected to other CB?
It's across the Mass Pike is CB,
Across the Mass Pike.
but there's really no access, obviously. So it'd have to come up off of Stafford or Center Depot. And the little map that I did there shows that some of it is wet. And he doesn't own all of that. I don't know the exact property that he's thinking about requesting to rezone.
This is what you have, like a triangle, that's what he's requesting?
No, he never actually submitted a map showing that's the approximate location of what he might be asking for.
That's a little damp in there, I know that.
Yes. It shows up on,
Just a little.
on the wetland layer. So I didn't know whether, so the two choices, the planning board could sponsor that article, or the landowner could submit a petition to town meeting on his own. So I said I would bring it to you to make that call as to what would be the best way to go about bringing that to town meeting.
Seems like there's a little bit of, like, just, it's like a random,
Yeah.
we don't really, I mean, if he wants to come in and talk to it, like, once we get past this,
Mhm.
this VGG
Right,
stuff,
there's no hurry.
then he can come in and talk to us, but I don't think that we would wanna sponsor something that was,
You're pretty familiar. Yeah, there's nothing else in that area that's CB or.
Right.
It's all.
CB there.
Well,
That's
this is-
in the- this
Yeah,
is
was he
the pipe,
talking
right?
these lots over here, or, I mean, this, I don't even think there's buildable in there.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah,
I
that's-
think he
there's
owns some
nothing
of
there.
these lots in
Yeah.
here. I don't think he owns this area over here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't, there'd be no access there from.
You know what that is, would you? Mass Pike's right here, Arnie's is here, Route 20's right
Okay,
here.
Arnie's over. Okay.
Bad corner.
Yeah, top. Top end section.
Okay. Where's,
So I think the sense is he should submit that as a landowner request rather than as
Yeah.
a planning board.
if he wants to come in
sponsored
and
article.
talk to us, rather than
Okay.
initially,
unless he can convince, I mean, he could come in and say, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Hardship or
and-
something
and
or whatever.
But
But as a landowner, he has the right to petition on
Exactly.
his own, so.
I mean, we are hopefully, on our budget for the next year, going to have a lot of, we're gonna start looking at the areas and,
Right.
and start
zoning.
zoning a little bit differently. Is there anything else that we need to get through that
Okay, we made, our agendas and everything, and we're going to, I think, two things, we need to get a couple of, engineers.
Yes, so Bill, you're
Bill's
gonna,
gonna do that
that'll
tomorrow.
be the focus for him tomorrow, make the calls, and, you have some names, you gave some
Yeah.
names to Bill.
Yeah, I'll give them to him.
So Ross has a couple of, people that he can recommend to.
Yeah,
Um,
if you haven't tried.
For traffic, environmental, or?
No, LSP stuff.
Okay.
Environmental.
Mike gave me a name of somebody as
Okay,
well,
cool.
so.
Okay.
All right,
So we're
we
looking
have a
for,
couple.
just so we're looking for the, kind of like an environmental project manager kind of thing, right? That's without
Well,
thinking
someone
like,
who's familiar with the contaminated soil.
Yeah.
Testing and stuff, and as far as then, I guess site management,
Yeah, I almost want to look at
procedure.
an environmental engineering firm to make sure that what they're doing is really suitable
Yeah.
for what they're doing, so I would reach out to.
I mean, because, I mean, not that we don't distrust anybody, it's just
No,
the idea
checks
that
and
we wanna
balances.
make sure that,
Yeah.
That's what it is.
that, cause they're gonna wanna do it the cheapest, easiest,
Yeah.
simplest, quickest way, and we're gonna wanna make sure that they do it the most conservative way, so
Yeah.
they can, there isn't an issue. If it's
Yeah.
done right, you don't have to go back.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
So, we also need, we're looking for a land use / engineering attorney that will just make sure that we're not missing something, that all of our pieces fit.
And that
So-
person should be attending all these meetings.
And we want that person to attend all the meetings,
Mhm.
and, if we could reach out and then they, whatever contract they have to draw up with, Robin, or whatever they do to kind of work for us, kind of get that done quickly.
Right, 'cause we've been
We need to
looking
have the
at the
odor
streets.
specialist, that we need somebody, and John was telling me that there's people who kind of specialize in like clean rooms and HEPA filters and, just to make sure what they have in place, because we can all look at it and they can tell us it's the best plan
Yeah.
ever, but we don't really
know
know if it's
that.
the best, we don't get it. And that's it, that's the big.
Sure, an environmental engineering firm will have people on staff that specialize in all the different details. So if we contact, and there's quite a few in the area.
They might even have odor on
They'll
top
have
of
something
that.
for everybody that can cover everything.
Is there any-
Litigation and things like that.
Yeah, because we don't know what happened, you have a power plant, and what happened, I mean, is there air quality issues? Like, we need somebody who just is going to give us, slow us down for certain areas, that's important, that's priority, we're just gonna make calls until it all happens.
Do you think our next meeting could be here or upstairs? What do you think?
It doesn't, I mean, if we're only gonna have the same handful of people, it's so much easier upstairs. You guys like upstairs better, don't you? I think having the table and the plan in front of us makes
Yeah.
it so
Right.
much easier.
Okay, because I have to post,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
right? And
Yeah,
I'm just
do-
gonna put on the agenda, just like you say it. I'm not gonna specify.
You're talking about the planning board?
Yeah, post the meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
planning board. What do you think?
We have quite a few people here, and I wonder if that
Where's
room
this?
is big enough. There
This-
was,
Yeah, it's right here.
How many-
they come in with 6 or 7.
Right, that's what I'm thinking of. They
That's the
sat
problem.
right
is
over
that,
there.
They come in with 7.
You want it
Actually,
down here?
20 seats will hold
If
up.
you- if
I
you-
am-
They filled one full sheet.
They did?
What's that, like 30? All right, I'll see if I can get it for the rest of the meetings.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
I know it's not ideal.
Did
but-
someone help you set up down here?
Yeah, Eric came down and helped me.
Don't we have I thought we had a new custodian to help, did they
He
help
was
you?
out today.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
All right, so we're getting all tied. Is there anything that anybody else wants to, thank you guys for having these super long meetings and getting through this stuff. I know it's not easy and.
Okay, so next week it's a strictly BGG.
Yep, and I'll
That's it.
put it just as you said
Traffic
on the
environmental, I'm
agenda.
not, I'm worried that we're not gonna be able to get a professional in here to help us in that short of time.
I agree, we're stuck, but we're in this situation.
I know, it's-
And we gotta, if, just so you know, so if we get to decide, if we don't have a decision, it's automatically approved as is without conditions. So even if we get to the very end and we're not through, then we do our best to add conditions to protect the
Everything.
town.
We can't, at that point, not approve it, if we're not done, and we don't have all the
That's,
information we
not-
need.
I mean, that would be up to an attorney to decide if, I mean, in reality, denying these site plans, we're not allowed, it's site plan for a reason, because they don't have to submit a site plan, it's in their host agreement to submit a site plan.
Yeah,
It's
actually, I
very
have,
technical.
actually, I have that document here.
So it's, okay.
So, this is an extract from host community agreement. Ross, you had asked this question in an email to me.
Absolutely,
And,
thank you.
so, when you get
This
to
is
see
a
that.
special permit, it's a site plan
Paragraph
review.
2 says,
Do you have a whole host agreement?
yes.
Can you just shoot me a copy,
Sure.
a good copy of it?
So paragraph 2 says that they are subject to site plan review and approval by the planning board. So I think that site plan review and approval, I think, is important so that the planning board does have to approve the site plan for them to move forward. The middle part of that paragraph talks about their ability to submit a definitive subdivision plan, which I just mentioned, that should be coming in next week. And then the last part of that paragraph says that they will provide funding to the extent necessary for any reasonable costs of the planning board's employment of outside consultants. So they will pay for whatever consultants are necessary for the board to do that plan.
So the goal is by the end of this week to have these consultants in, you know, pretty much, I mean.
Today's Wednesday.
Yep, and we don't work on Friday,
Because we don't.
I work on Friday.
So the last item is the approval of the decisions that I had sent you.
Yeah.
To
And we
authorize.
signed, I already signed this.
Oh, you did sign them, okay.
Yeah,
Great.
those are.
Okay, fine.
Motion to adjourn?
So, one more thing. So, Bill, you're probably gonna have better luck with some of the larger engineering firms.
Okay.
They're gonna have the most people on staff, they're gonna have the most offices where they could probably free somebody up to do something like this.
Okay.
If you go to a small firm, they're probably really busy and would have to pull somebody away from something else, and that may not be feasible, so.
Okay.
I'd look at some of the larger national environmental firms that have offices in the area. I can get you a list of a few of them if you need them.
Okay.
There's several of them there.
Okay.
I'll
Why
send that
don't
out to you tomorrow.
If you have some names, why don't you send
Okay.
them to me? The other
Second.
item is,
All in favor?
hold it.
But
One more.
Planning director, did you want to talk about that? I don't know. Deadline was tomorrow, but I don't.
So the resumes we've received to this
I mean, we
point,
do have the free version, is the, I mean,
Yeah.
that,
I don't,
but
like, can we get the paid one? Because I think they target specific people who have their resumes. And this free version, free sometimes is
yeah,
is
I'm not
not
sure,
working.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the difference is, but.
Can you go ahead and then submit the invoice and we'll just reimburse you?
Sure.
We've already been authorized to do so, will you just do that, just because I guess that nobody in the town has a credit card and, so if you could just
Yeah.
get it up there.
is that the best place, Indeed?
I mean, I see a lot of other ads on there, so it's a spot that people look. There's
Mhm.
other places, but that's definitely a spot that people look, but,
Yeah, I didn't
I
know
mean,
if that
let's
was like
just-
the future.
Let's just,
it's disappointing we haven't had much.
you know
Good.
people don't wanna work here, right?
It's beginning to look that way.
No, I'm telling you, I have literally walked into other planning offices in different towns and tried to recruit planners physically. Now I'm on video saying that, and they said that it's all about, it's not just about the money, and I said, we'll negotiate. I mean, Friday's off, and it's pretty much the environment of this building, whatever it may be. Maybe it's because it's an old building, and no one wants to work in this old building, who knows? But that's what I keep on hearing, and, you know, I'm so charming as I go in there, and it is what it is, what can I say? Hopefully this will, it'll change a little bit, and eventually we'll be able to get a planner.
Hope so.
So,
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.